The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy that flows through stars, planets, and the vast darkness between them. But what happens when something arrives that doesn't belong? When the Force itself seems to reach across impossible distances and pull something from beyond the stars? The Jedi would spend years trying to answer that question. It began with a child who had no name, no past, and eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. The grasslands of Dantooine stretched endlessly beneath twin suns, waves of golden grain swaying in winds that carried the scent of wildflowers and rich soil. The Jedi Enclave stood as a testament to serenity. Ancient stone buildings weathered by centuries, their walls humming with the quiet presence of the Force. Jedi moved through courtyards and meditation gardens, their robes rustling softly, their minds focused on contemplation and training. It was a place of peace, far from the political machinations of Coruscant and the scars still healing across the Republic after the Jedi Civil War. Master Vandar Tok'er, diminutive in stature but immense in wisdom, stood in the Enclave's central chamber when the disturbance rippled through the Force. It wasn't a scream or a cry for help. It was something stranger. A presence that shouldn't exist, like a note in a song that didn't belong to any known melody. The ancient Jedi Master's long ears twitched as he closed his eyes, reaching out with senses honed over 8 centuries of life. Master Vandar, Padawan Bastila Shan approached, her young face creased with concern. The battle meditation prodigy had learned to trust her instincts, and right now those instincts told her something was very wrong. I felt it too. Something in the Force just appeared. Not appeared, young one, Vandar corrected gently, his staff tapping against stone as he moved toward the Enclave's entrance. Arrived. Come. We must investigate quickly. They found him 3 kilometers from the Enclave, collapsed in a field where the grass had been flattened in a perfect circle, as if something had pressed down from above with enormous force. The boy couldn't have been more than 6 standard years old, wearing strange clothing, some kind of gray, synthetic material that the Jedi didn't recognize. His dark hair was cut short, military style, and even unconscious, his small hands were clenched into fists. Bastila knelt beside him, placing her fingers gently against his temple. Her eyes widened. Master, his mind is fragmented. I see flashes of things I don't understand. Enormous ships that aren't Republic or Sith design. Beings in armor that covers them completely. And she pulled her hand back as if burned. Pain. So much pain. Needles and surgeries, and she looked up at Vandar, disturbed. What was done to him? Vandar placed one small hand on the boy's chest, and the Force answered with something that made the ancient master's breath catch. The midi-chlorian count was staggering, not quite at the level of legends like Revan or the ancient Sith Lords, but far beyond most Jedi. More than that, though, was the quality of his presence. Where most Force sensitives radiated emotions, fear, hope, anger, joy, this child's presence felt like cold tactical assessment even in unconsciousness. A soldier's mind in a child's body. We will take him to the Enclave, Vandar decided. Whatever brought him here, the Force wills that we help him. The boy woke 3 days later in the Enclave's medical wing, and his first action was to roll off the bed into a defensive crouch, eyes scanning for threats and exits with the precision of trained combatant. Vandar watched from the doorway as the child assessed him, calculating threat level, physical capabilities, weapon status, before some of the tension bled from his small frame. Where am I? The boy's voice was flat, controlled. What is this place? You are safe, Vandar replied, stepping forward slowly. This is the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine. I am Master Vandar Tok'er. What do you remember, young one? The boy's jaw tightened. His eyes, impossibly focused for a child, stared at nothing as he searched his memory. I don't know. Flashes. A voice in my head. Someone called. He faltered, and for the first time, uncertainty crept into his expression. I don't remember my name. The Force brought you here for a reason, Vandar said gently. Your memories may return in time. Until then, you need a name. What feels right to you? The boy considered this with the seriousness of someone 3 times his age. Finally, he said, "John, that sounds familiar." Over the following weeks, John proved to be unlike any Force-sensitive child the Jedi had ever encountered. He learned the basic meditation techniques with startling speed, but his approach was all wrong by Jedi standards. Where other younglings learned to open themselves to the Force, to let it flow through them naturally, John approached it like an operator learning a new weapon system. He cataloged what the Force could do, enhance reflexes, sense danger, move objects, and practiced with grim determination. Master Vrook Lamar, ever the skeptic, watched the boy complete training exercises designed for Padawans twice his age. "He treats the Force as a tool," Vrook observed to Vandar, "not as something to commune with. This concerns me." "He treats everything as a tool," Vandar replied thoughtfully. "Watch him in the training yard." John sparred with a practice remote, dodging its stun bolts with preternatural grace. But it wasn't grace born of surrender to the Force. It was calculated positioning, threat assessment, and tactical superiority. Every movement served a purpose. Every dodge positioned him for a counterattack. When he finally disabled the remote with a precise telekinetic push, he didn't celebrate. He immediately began analyzing what he could have done better. Bastila, now assigned as one of his instructors, approached after the session. "You're progressing incredibly fast, John. But you need to learn to trust the Force, not just use it." "What's the difference?" John asked, and the genuine confusion in his voice told Bastila this would be a longer conversation than she'd anticipated. The Jedi Council convened that evening to discuss the strange boy's future. Master Zart Leston advocated for intensive training. Master Vrook argued for caution. But it was Vandar who saw the clearest path. "The Force brought him here when we need warriors most," the ancient master said. "The Sith are scattered but not destroyed. The Republic still bleeds from Revan's war. Perhaps John is the Force's answer, a Jedi who understands that sometimes, to protect peace, one must be willing to fight for it." "That path leads to the dark side," Vrook warned. Or, Vandar countered, "it leads to balance." They decided to train him, but carefully. John would learn the Jedi Code, study the philosophy of the Force, and train in lightsaber combat. But he would also be watched closely for any signs of darkness taking root. John, for his part, accepted the decision with a simple nod. When Vandar asked him if he wanted to become a Jedi, the boy's response was immediate. "If it means I can protect people, then yes. That's what soldiers do." "Jedi are not soldiers," Vandar gently corrected. John met his gaze with eyes far too old for his face. "Maybe they should be." If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. As Dantooin's suns set beyond the Enclave walls, casting long shadows across training grounds where John practiced forms he'd learned in mere days, none of the Jedi Masters realized they had just accepted into their order someone who would challenge everything they believed about what it meant to be a guardian of peace and justice. The Force had indeed brought him here for a reason. Whether that reason would save the Jedi or change them forever remained to be seen. For years passed on Dantooin, and John grew in ways that both impressed and troubled his instructors. At 10 standard years old, he stood taller than most human children his age, his frame lean and hard from relentless training. Where other younglings played and laughed between lessons, John treated every moment as an opportunity to improve. The Force flowed through him with increasing strength, but his relationship with it remained fundamentally different from traditional Jedi practice. Master Zar Leston had taken personal responsibility for John's education in Jedi philosophy. They sat now in one of the Enclave's meditation chambers, surrounded by the soft glow of light filtering through ancient stained glass. The chamber smelled of incense and old stone, peaceful and contemplative. John sat in perfect meditation posture, but Zar could sense the boy's mind, always active, always tactical, never truly at rest. "There is no emotion, there is peace," Zar recited the first line of the Jedi Code. "What does this mean to you, John?" "That emotions compromise tactical decision-making," John replied without hesitation. "Fear causes mistakes. Anger clouds judgment. Peace allows for clear assessment of threats and appropriate response. Zar sighed inwardly. It wasn't wrong, exactly, but it missed the deeper spiritual truth entirely. The code teaches us to let go of emotion, not simply to suppress it for tactical advantage. Emotion creates attachment, and attachment leads to suffering. We must learn to exist in harmony with the Force, accepting what comes without clinging to outcomes. John opened his eyes, and Zar saw the question forming before the boy spoke it. Master, when the Sith attacked during Revan's war, did the Jedi who died do so because they accepted the outcome? Or did they die because they weren't prepared enough to survive? That is not. Zar stopped himself. The question was more complex than John realized, cutting to the heart of debates that had raged through the Order for millennia. The goal of a Jedi is not merely survival, John. We serve the Force, and through it, all living things. Sometimes that service requires sacrifice. Sacrifice is acceptable when it accomplishes the mission, John agreed. But unnecessary death due to inadequate preparation or training isn't sacrifice. It's failure. Zar dismissed him early that day, troubled by how the boy could understand so much yet miss the essential truth. John spoke of missions and objectives, of tactical superiority and acceptable losses. He didn't yet grasp that the Jedi way wasn't about winning. It was about maintaining balance, even if that balance sometimes demanded defeat. Lightsaber training proved to be John's greatest strength and his most glaring deviation from Jedi norms. Bastila Shan, now a full Jedi Knight after her role in defeating Darth Malak, oversaw his practice in the Enclave's training hall. The room echoed with the snap hiss of training sabers, the smell of ozone sharp in the air as multiple students worked through their forms. John moved through SHIHO velocities with mechanical precision. The basic form taught to all Jedi initiates, emphasized simple strikes and defensive positions. In John's hands, it became something else entirely. Where other students flowed from position to position, John's movements were economical and brutal. Every strike aimed for disabling points. Every defense positioned him for immediate counterattack. His footwork spoke of military close quarters, combat adapted to lightsaber mechanics. Stop, Bastila called, and John froze mid-form. She approached, her own saber extinguished at her belt. You're treating this like hand-to-hand combat training. A lightsaber isn't a vibroblade. It doesn't obey normal physics. The blade has no weight except the hilt. You need to let the Force guide your movements, not your tactical mind. The Force enhances my reflexes by approximately 40%, John reported. Combined with predictive awareness, I can anticipate opponent movements 0.3 seconds before execution. That's more than sufficient for most combat scenarios. Bastila felt a headache forming. John, you can't quantify the Force like that. It's not about percentages or time measurements. When you truly connect with the Force in combat, you don't think, you simply act in perfect harmony with the galaxy around you. John considered this, his young face serious. With respect, Master Bastila, that sounds like a good way to get killed if your opponent is thinking tactically while you're being harmonious. A few nearby students snickered. Bastila's jaw tightened. 10 laps around the Enclave perimeter. Now, John didn't argue, didn't protest the punishment. He simply nodded, deactivated his training saber, and headed for the exit at a steady run. As he left, Bastila heard one student whisper to another, "He's right though. For means nothing if you're dead." That evening, Vandar summoned Bastila to his chambers. The ancient Jedi Master sat in meditation, his small form barely visible in the dim light. When Bastila entered, his eyes opened with their characteristic wisdom and warmth. "John troubles you," Vandar observed. "It wasn't a question. He excels at everything we teach him," Bastila said carefully. "His Force sensitivity is remarkable, his dedication absolute. But Master, he doesn't understand what it means to be a Jedi. He treats the Order like a military unit, and the Force like a weapon. Is the Force not a tool we use to serve the galaxy?" Vandar asked gently. "It's not the same thing. The Force is." Bastila struggled for the words. "It's communion, not utility. John approaches everything like a mission briefing. I've never seen him simply enjoy the Force's presence or meditate for the sake of peace. He meditates to enhance focus. He trains to eliminate weaknesses. He studies tactics when he should be studying philosophy. Vandar was quiet for a long moment, his gnarled fingers steepled before him. The boy's mind is unusual, yes. But consider young Bastila. Perhaps the Force brought him here precisely because we need someone who sees things differently. The Jedi survived the Civil War, but barely. How many died because they were unprepared for Jedi who became Sith? How many fell because they couldn't imagine our own turning against us? You're saying we should become more like soldiers? Bastila asked, unable to keep the shock from her voice. I am saying, Vandar replied carefully, that perhaps there is wisdom in balancing peace with preparation. The Sith will rise again, they always do. When they come, would you rather face them as contemplative monks, or as guardians ready to protect the Republic? Bastila left troubled, her mind churning with questions that had no easy answers. John's reputation grew among the other students. Some admired his skill and dedication. Others found him cold and unsettling. He made few friends, though not for lack of trying. He simply didn't understand the casual social dynamics that came naturally to other children. When asked to play, he suggested tactical exercises. When invited to relax, he chose to practice. His idea of conversation was debriefing the day's training and identifying areas for improvement. But there were moments, rare and fleeting, when the teachers glimpsed something beneath the tactical exterior. Once, Bastila found him sitting alone in one of the Enclave's gardens, his hand resting on the trunk of a bronzium tree. His eyes were closed, and for the first time, his face looked peaceful rather than focused. What are you doing? She asked softly. The tree is old, John replied without opening his eyes. Hundreds of years. I can feel it through the Force, all the seasons it's weathered, all the life it supported. He paused, searching for words. It's patient. It doesn't fight to survive. It just grows, and that's enough. Bastila felt something shift in her perception of the boy. You understand more than you let on. I understand that everything here is connected, John said, finally opening his eyes. Every person, every plant, every rock. The Force binds it all together. But Master Bastila, connection creates vulnerability. If everything is linked, then everyone can be hurt through those connections. That's why Jedi avoid attachment. It's a tactical weakness. And just like that, the moment of insight collapsed back into military analysis. Bastila wanted to scream. Instead, she sat beside him and said, attachment isn't weakness, John. It's what makes us care enough to protect others. Yes, it causes pain when we lose people. But without that pain, without that connection, we're just empty weapons following orders. John thought about this for a long time, watching Dantooan's sons paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Finally, he said quietly, maybe that's what I'm supposed to be. The words hung in the air between them, neither comforting nor resolved, as the ancient enclave settled into another peaceful evening, unaware that their unusual student would soon face challenges that would force him to decide exactly what kind of Jedi he would become. The call came when John was 12, and it changed everything. Master Vandar entered the training hall, where John practiced advanced Makashi techniques, the dueling form favored by precision fighters. The boy had taken to it with disturbing aptitude, his tactical mind perfectly suited to Makashi's emphasis on economy of motion and calculated strikes. Sweat dampened his dark hair as he flowed through the forms, his training saber leaving trails of blue light in the dim morning air. John, Vandar called gently. We must speak. John completed his sequence before deactivating the blade. Turning to face the Jedi Master with the same focused attention, he gave everything. No wasted movement, no unnecessary questions. He simply waited. The Council has decided you are ready for your first mission beyond Dantooan, Vandar said. Master Zar will accompany you to Taris. The upper city has experienced a series of disappearances, young Force sensitives vanishing without trace. The local authorities suspect slavers, but the Republic has requested Jedi assistance. Understood, John replied. Mission objective: locate and recover the missing Force sensitives. Secondary objective: identify and eliminate the threat. Rules of engagement. Vander's ears drooped slightly. John, this is not a military operation. We go to investigate and, if possible, negotiate. Violence is always the last resort for a Jedi. Violence is often the only language certain people understand, John countered, then caught himself. But I'll follow Master Zar's lead. The journey to Taris aboard a Republic transport gave John his first real glimpse of the galaxy beyond Dantooin's peaceful grasslands. He stood in the ship's observation deck, watching hyperspace tunnel past in streaks of brilliant light, feeling the Force ripple and flow around the vessel like water around a stone. Somewhere out there, people needed help. That was all that mattered. Master Zar found him there hours into the journey. The elder Jedi's brown robes rustled as he joined John at the viewport, his weathered face reflected in the transparent steel. Tell me what you know of Taris, Zar said. Ecumenopolis. Planet-wide city spanning multiple vertical levels. Upper city houses the wealthy and politically connected. Lower city contains the working class and industrial sectors. Undercity is largely lawless, home to criminals, refugees, and those society has abandoned. John recited the information from his studies without hesitation. Current population, approximately 6 billion. Major industries include technology manufacturing and fuel processing. Republic presence is moderate. Crime syndicates have significant influence in lower city operations. Correct, Zar acknowledged. But you've told me facts, not truth. What are the people of Taris like? John frowned, uncertain what the master wanted. Human majority, with significant populations of Twi'leks, Duros, and other species. Cultural values emphasize. John. Zar's voice was patient but firm. I'm not asking for a tactical briefing. I'm asking you to think about the living beings we'll encounter. They have hopes, fears, dreams. They love and grieve and struggle. We're not going to Taris to complete a mission. We're going to help people who are suffering. That's what I said, John replied, genuinely confused. The mission is to help people. Zar studied the boy for a long moment, seeing both the brilliance and the blindness in those young eyes. Yes, but the difference between a soldier and a Jedi is that a soldier completes the mission. A Jedi serves the people, even if that means the mission fails. John opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. The concept troubled him deeply. Mission failure meant objectives unmet, which meant people remained in danger. How could accepting failure serve anyone? But he'd learned when to press his questions, and when to simply acknowledge and reflect later. I understand, Master. They both knew he didn't. Not yet. Taris emerged from hyperspace like a jewel of metal and light, the entire planet glittering with billions of illuminated windows and streaming traffic lanes. Ships of every size and configuration swarmed around the world, a constant flow of commerce and transportation that never ceased. John felt the Force presence of the planet, millions upon millions of lives compressed into vertical layers, each level a world unto itself. The upper city was a revelation. Gleaming spires reached toward the sky, their surfaces polished to mirror brightness. Wealthy citizens in expensive clothing walked wide boulevards lined with exotic plants and expensive shops. Speeders hummed past on designated traffic lanes, their designs sleek and elegant. The air smelled clean, processed, and filtered to remove any hint of the industrial processes that powered the city below. But beneath the glamour, John's tactical senses registered security checkpoints every few blocks, armed guards watching crowds with suspicious eyes, and the subtle tension of a society built on inequality. The Force whispered of the fear and desperation in the levels below, seeping up through the Duracrete like toxic gas. They met with Captain Danis of the Tarisian Civil Authority in a prefabricated security office that smelled of CAF and recycled air. The captain was a hard-faced woman in her 40s, her uniform crisp despite long hours, her eyes carrying the weight of cases that never seemed to close. Thank the Force you're here, she said, gesturing them to seats across from her desk. 8 disappearances in the last 3 months. All of them kids between ages 8 and 14. All of them from upper city families. And before you ask, yes, we've investigated. No bodies, no ransom demands, no witnesses. They just vanish. Have there been disappearances in the lower city as well? Tsar asked carefully. Danis's expression hardened. Probably. But lower city families don't have the political connections to demand investigations. We barely have resources to patrol there. If kids go missing. She trailed off, and John saw the guilt in her eyes. She cared, but the system she served had priorities. We need to see the locations where the upper city children disappeared, John said. It wasn't a request. Danis raised an eyebrow at the young Padawan's tone, but nodded. I'll have an officer escort you. But be careful. Whoever's doing this has been smart enough to avoid security cameras, witnesses, and forensic evidence. They're professionals. The first site was a residential tower in the upper city's premium district. Luxury apartments with balconies overlooking the cityscape, private landing pads for family speeders, security that should have been impenetrable. A 10-year-old girl had vanished from her bedroom while her parents slept 3 doors down. No signs of forced entry. No struggle. Just gone. John stood in the child's room, reaching out with the force. The space felt wrong, not evil exactly, but empty in a way that made his instincts scream warnings. Someone had been here. Someone who knew how to hide their presence. Master Tsar, John said quietly. There's a void here. Like someone deliberately erased their presence from the Force. Tsar frowned, moving beside his Padawan. The elder Jedi closed his eyes, extending his senses. After a moment, his expression darkened. You're right. This is sophisticated work. Only someone with significant Force training could mask themselves so completely. Dark Jedi? John asked, his hand instinctively moving toward where a lightsaber would hang once he completed his trials. Perhaps. Or something worse. A fallen Jedi who still possesses training but has abandoned the light. Tsar's voice was grim. We need to investigate the other sites. If the pattern holds. It did. Each location showed the same deliberate erasure, the same professional execution. No evidence, no mistakes, just missing children, and the faint residue of someone who knew exactly how to move unseen through the Force. On the third site, John noticed something the investigators had missed. A tiny scorch mark on a windowsill, barely visible. He crouched, examining it closely, then touched his fingers to the mark and brought them to his nose. Lightsaber, he said flatly. Low power setting, used to cut through the window seal silently. Whoever took these children is definitely Force-sensitive and armed. Good eyes are acknowledged. But this raises troubling questions. Why would someone with Jedi training target children? Force-sensitive children specifically, John corrected. Captain Danis mentioned all the victims were between 8 and 14, prime age for Force training. This isn't random kidnapping. It's targeted recruitment. The implication hung between them like a blade. Someone was building an army of Force sensitives, taking them young enough to be molded, training them in secret. The Sith were supposedly scattered, broken after Malak's defeat. But the dark side was patient, and power always found ways to survive. We need to go to the lower city, John said suddenly. If they took 8 children from up here where it causes political pressure, they've probably taken dozens from below, where nobody cares enough to investigate. More victims means more chances they made a mistake. Tsar wanted to argue that they should report their findings to the council first, follow proper protocols. But he saw the logic in John's reasoning, and more importantly, recognized the urgency in his Padawan's voice. These weren't abstract tactical objectives to the boy, they were children in danger. Perhaps John understood more about being a Jedi than Tsar gave him credit for. Very well, Tsar agreed. But John, in the lower city, we may face violence. Remember, our goal is to save lives, not take them. Even if the people we face have already proven they'll kill children, the question hung between them as they left the pristine upper city behind, descending into the industrial darkness below, where justice was a luxury and survival was the only law that mattered. John felt the Force shift around him, darker, more desperate, tinged with the suffering of billions trapped in systems they couldn't escape. He was 12 years old, trained as a Jedi, but thinking like a soldier, and about to learn that the galaxy's evil didn't always announce itself with red lightsabers and force lightning. Sometimes it wore the mask of necessity, of pragmatism, of doing what needed to be done. And sometimes the line between guardian and warrior was drawn in blood. The lower city of Taris existed in perpetual twilight, its sky blocked by layers of platforms and buildings that stretched kilometers overhead. Neon signs flickered in a dozen languages, advertising cantinas, repair shops, and services that ranged from legal to decidedly not. The air tasted of machine oil, ozone from failing power conduits, and the acrid smell of too many beings compressed into too little space. Rust streaked the walls. Water dripped from pipes that should have been replaced decades ago. This was where the galaxy's promises came to die. John's senses immediately shifted into threat assessment mode. Narrow alleyways provided perfect ambush positions. Elevated catwalks offered sniper vantage points. The crowds moved with the practiced wariness of people who knew violence could erupt without warning. He tracked potential threats automatically, the Rodian watching them too carefully from a doorway, the group of thugs marking them as outsiders, the security cameras that had been deliberately destroyed. "Stay close," Zar murmured, his hand resting near his lightsaber hilt. "The Force is troubled here. Desperation breeds darkness." They made their way deeper into the lower city, following the fragmentary leads that Captain Danis had reluctantly provided. 3 reported disappearances in the past year, all dismissed as runaways or gang recruitment. No investigations. No resources allocated. Just file numbers and forgotten names. The first family lived in a cramped apartment in the industrial sector, where the constant rumble of machinery made conversation difficult and sleep nearly impossible. A Twi'lek mother answered their knock, her leku hanging limp with exhaustion, her eyes hollow with the kind of grief that never quite faded. "You're Jedi?" she asked in accented basic, disbelief evident in her voice. Nobody cares when lower city children disappear. Why now? "We care," John said before Zar could offer the diplomatic response. "Tell us about your daughter." The woman, her name was Tira, invited them into a space barely large enough for 2 people, let alone a family. Faded holos on the walls showed a young Twi'lek girl with bright eyes and a radiant smile. The mother's hands shook as she spoke. Nyla was 12. Smart, so smart. She could do things. Move objects without touching them. Know when I was coming home, before I arrived. I didn't understand it, but it frightened some of the neighbors. Then one night, 6 months ago, she didn't come home from the recycling plant where she worked sorting scrap. Tira's voice broke. I searched for weeks. The authorities said she probably joined one of the swoop gangs. But Nyla wouldn't. She wanted to save credits, maybe leave Taris someday. John knelt beside the mother, his young face serious. Through the Force, he could feel her pain like a physical weight, crushing and absolute. For a moment, his tactical thinking quieted, replaced by something more fundamental, the recognition of suffering and the need to end it. "We'll find out what happened to Nyla," John said quietly. "I promise." Zar touched his shoulder in warning. Jedi didn't make promises they might not keep, but John ignored it. Some things were more important than protocol. They interviewed 2 more families, each story a variation on the same theme. Force-sensitive children, noticed by someone, vanishing without trace. The authorities didn't care because lower city lives didn't matter to upper city politics. The families couldn't afford private investigators. The children were simply erased from the galaxy's ledger, mourned by parents who would never know their fate. By the time they emerged from the third home, a single father whose son had disappeared 3 months prior, John's jaw was set in a hard line that made him look far older than 12. "This is unacceptable," he said flatly. "The Republic claims to protect all its citizens, but these people might as well not exist. Where's the justice? Where's the—" "Peace, John," Zar interrupted gently. "Your anger is understandable, but it clouds judgment. We must focus on what? Following leads while more children vanish." John's voice rose despite his training. "Master, Whoever is taking these kids has been operating for at least 6 months, probably longer. They're selective, professional, and they specifically target Force sensitives. That means they know what to look for, which means they've done this before. We need to find them now, not investigate carefully and file reports. Zar recognized the passion beneath the tactical analysis. This was the closest he'd ever seen John come to genuine emotion beyond focused determination. And how do you propose we locate someone who's evaded detection for months? John was quiet for a moment, his mind racing through possibilities. Then his eyes focused on something across the street, a flickering holosign advertising a cantina called the Blaster's Edge. More specifically, on the cluster of rough-looking individuals loitering near its entrance, marking territory. Information flows through criminal networks, John said slowly. If someone's taking children systematically, the underworld knows about it. Either they're involved or they've noticed the pattern. We need to ask questions in places where people actually pay attention to what happens in the lower city. Cantinas and criminal establishments are dangerous for Jedi, Zar warned. Our presence tends to provoke complications. Then we don't announce ourselves as Jedi. John was already pulling his outer robe off, leaving just his inner tunic. He mussed his hair, adjusted his posture from the upright Jedi bearing to something looser, more street. I'm just a kid asking questions. You're my guardian. We're looking for my sister, who went missing. Nobody needs to know about the Force or lightsabers unless absolutely necessary. Zar wanted to argue, to insist on proper protocol and council approval for undercover operations. But he saw the determination in John's eyes and recognized something important. This wasn't just about tactics for the boy. This was about the children they'd promised to find. About justice for families the galaxy had abandoned. Very well, Zar agreed reluctantly. But at the first sign of serious danger, we extract immediately. Understood. Understood. The Blaster's Edge smelled of cheap alcohol, smoke from death sticks, and the particular musk of too many species crammed into inadequate ventilation. The lighting was deliberately dim, hiding faces and transactions better left unseen. Gamblers clustered around sabacc tables. Bounty hunters occupied corner booths, discussing contracts in low voices. The bartender, a scarred Deveronian with filed horns, watched everyone with the calculation of someone who'd survived by knowing when to act and when to stay silent. John and Zar entered quietly, making their way to the bar. The Padawan moved with none of his usual precision, instead adopting the slight nervousness of a lower city kid out of his depth. It was a remarkable performance, Zar thought. The boy had studied deception the same way he studied lightsaber forms. We're looking for information, John said to the bartender, his voice younger and more uncertain than usual. My sister disappeared 2 months ago. 12 years old, dark hair. Someone said people in places like this notice things the authorities miss. The Deveronian studied them with yellow eyes that missed nothing. Information costs, kid. What are you paying with? John produced a credit chip, modest amount, enough to show seriousness without flashing wealth. The bartender took it, made it disappear, and leaned forward conspiratorially. Kids disappear in the lower city all the time, he said. Usually gangs recruit them, or they fall into the undercity and never climb back out. But the past year? Something different. Kids vanish clean, no bodies, no ransom, no witnesses. Word is there's an organization operating. Professional. They target specific types. What types? John pressed. The bartender glanced around, then lowered his voice further. The weird ones. Kids who can do things that don't make sense. Move stuff without touching it. Sense things they shouldn't know. The kind of kids that make people nervous. Force sensitives. John's suspicions confirmed. Who's taking them? Don't know for certain. But 3 weeks ago, I heard something interesting. Drunk spacer bragging about a cargo run to an old mining facility in the Outer Rim. Said his manifest listed specialized recruits, and the payment was triple normal rates. Mentioned the cargo was delicate and needed special containment, the kind that suppresses abilities. The bartender's eyes flickered to John's face, searching. You understand what I'm saying, kid? Where's the facility? John asked, his voice hardening despite himself. Didn't get coordinates, but he mentioned the Ojoster sector. Old Republic mining operations out there were abandoned after the veins ran dry. Lots of empty stations, perfect for someone who wants to operate off the grid. The Deveronian straightened, signaling the conversation was over. That's all I know. You didn't hear it from me. John nodded, turning to leave, but a hand clamped on his shoulder. He looked up into the scarred face of a Weequay enforcer, the muscle for one of the local gangs. 3 more thugs flanked him, blocking their exit. Jedi, the Weequay growled, his breath reeking of alcohol. Thought you could hide it, but I can smell self-righteous peacekeepers. You're in our territory now, and the exchange doesn't appreciate you asking questions. Zar's hand moved toward his lightsaber, but John raised his own hand in a staying gesture. The Padawan's tactical mind assessed the situation instantly. 4 hostiles, armed with blasters and vibroblades. Crowded cantina with civilians in the line of fire. Escalation to violence would cause casualties and destroy their investigation. We're not looking for trouble, John said calmly. Just try to find missing children. That concerns you. Everything in the lower city concerns us, the Weequay replied. Especially Jedi poking around our business. Maybe we should teach you to mind your own. He didn't finish the sentence. John moved with force-enhanced speed, ducking under the enforcer's reach and delivering a precise strike to a nerve cluster in the Weequay's leg. The thug collapsed with a howl of pain. Before his companions could react, John had stepped back, positioned between them and Zar. His hands raised in a non-threatening gesture, despite the violence he'd just demonstrated. I don't want to hurt anyone else, John said, and his voice carried absolute conviction. But children are being taken and sold. If you know something about that and you're protecting it, then you're part of the problem. If you don't know anything, then we have no quarrel. Choose. The cantina had gone silent, every patron watching the confrontation. The remaining thugs looked at their leader writhing on the floor, then at the young human who dropped him in less than a second, then at the older Jedi, whose hand now rested openly on his lightsaber hilt. One of them spat on the floor and backed away. Take your questions elsewhere, Jedi. But you're making enemies you can't afford. As they left the blaster's edge, Zar placed a hand on John's shoulder. That was well handled. You avoided unnecessary violence, while still establishing that we're not easy targets. I'm impressed. We have a lead, John replied, already moving to the next phase. Ojoster sector, abandoned mining facilities. We need to report to the council and request permission to investigate. Yes, Zar agreed. But John, we may be walking into a trap. Whoever is taking these children has resources and training. This won't be a simple rescue operation. John's expression was grim beyond his years. Then we'd better be prepared for combat. Because I'm not leaving those children in the hands of slavers, no matter what the council says. Zar heard the unspoken challenge in those words and felt both pride and concern. His Padawan was learning what it meant to fight for others, but still hadn't grasped the Jedi principle of surrender to the Force's will. John believed victory could be achieved through preparation and determination. He hadn't yet faced a situation where doing everything right still led to loss. That lesson, Zar feared, was coming soon. The Council's response came swiftly, transmitted by a secure holocom from Dantooine. Master Vander's holographic form flickered blue in the privacy of their temporary quarters, his ancient face grave as he listened to their report. Beside him, Masters Vrook and Zar's projection discussed the implications in hushed tones. This is deeply troubling, Vandar said finally. Organized abduction of force-sensitive children suggests more than simple slavery. Someone is building something, perhaps a dark side cult, perhaps something worse. We have actionable intelligence, John interjected, his voice respectful but insistent. The Ojoster sector facility. Every day we delay is another day those children spend in captivity. Patience, young one, Vrook's hologram replied with his characteristic stern tone. Rushing into unknown danger serves no one. We will dispatch a team of Jedi Knights to investigate properly. You and Master Zar should return to Dantooine. With respect, Master Rook, we're already here. John's jaw tightened. We've made contact with the families. We have local knowledge. Sending a new team means days of delay while they establish themselves and verify our findings. Those children don't have days. The council members exchanged glances through the holographic link. Vander's ears twitched thoughtfully. Your dedication is admirable, John. But you are still a Padawan. This mission has escalated beyond training exercise parameters. Master Zar stepped forward. Masters, if I may, John has shown remarkable judgment throughout this investigation. His tactical thinking identified patterns the local authorities missed. His negotiation in the lower city prevented violence. I believe he's ready for this challenge, and I will be with him every step of the way. Rook looked unconvinced, but Vandar contemplated silently for a long moment. Finally, the ancient master spoke. Very well. You may investigate the Ojoster sector, but with conditions. You will observe and gather intelligence only. If you confirm the presence of kidnapped children, you will report immediately and wait for reinforcements. No heroics, no unauthorized rescues. The Force will guide us to the right action, but wisdom requires we understand the situation fully before committing to battle. Understood, John replied, though Zar could sense his Padawan's reluctance. The boy wanted to act now, to storm whatever facility held the children and free them immediately. Patience had never been John's strength. They secured passage on a freight hauler heading toward the Outer Rim, a battered YT 1300 freighter whose captain asked no questions as long as credits transferred. The journey would take 3 days through hyperspace, giving John time to prepare both mentally and physically for what lay ahead. He spent hours in meditation, though his version remained fundamentally different from traditional Jedi practice. Where other Padawans sought to empty their minds and merge with the Force, John used meditation to sharpen focus, review tactical scenarios, and prepare contingency plans. His connection to the Force grew stronger daily, but it remained a tool he wielded rather than a current he surrendered to. On the second day of travel, Zar found him in the cargo hold, moving through lightsaber forms with his training saber. The Padawan had progressed beyond basic Shicho into advanced Makashi techniques, his movements economical and lethal. Each strike aimed for vulnerable points, each defense positioned for immediate counterattack. You've been practicing Makashi extensively, Zar observed. It's an elegant form favored by duelists. But it has weaknesses. It's designed for single-opponent combat and struggles against blaster fire or multiple attackers. Which is why I've also been studying Sorisu, John replied, not breaking his rhythm. Defensive form, optimized for deflecting blaster bolts. I've been running combat simulations. If the facility is guarded, we'll likely face multiple opponents with ranged weapons. Sorisu gives me the highest probability of protecting you and any rescued hostages while advancing to close quarters where Makashi becomes effective. Zar felt the familiar mixture of admiration and concern. You speak of forms as if they're weapon systems to be switched between tactically. But John, lightsaber combat is more than mechanics. It's about letting the Force flow through you, guiding your blade instinctively. When you overthink, you hesitate. When you hesitate in real combat, you die. John deactivated his training saber, turning to face his master. Sweat dampened his hair, his breathing controlled despite the intensive practice. Master, I've been thinking about what you said. About Jedi not being soldiers, about serving people rather than completing missions. I want to understand, but... He paused, searching for words. When those families on Taris told us about their missing children, I felt their pain through the Force. It was overwhelming, and I thought the only way to end their suffering is to bring those children home. That's the mission. How is that different from what you're teaching me? Zar sat on a cargo crate, gesturing for John to join him. The hum of the freighter's engines provided a steady background rhythm, as the Jedi Master considered his response carefully. The goal is the same, Zar admitted. But the path matters. A soldier might rescue those children by killing everyone in the facility, eliminating the threat permanently through overwhelming force. A Jedi seeks to rescue the children while also offering redemption to the captors, showing them a better path. We win not just the battle, but the war for their souls. And if they refuse redemption, if they're willing to kill the children rather than surrender, then we do what must be done, Zar said quietly. The Jedi Code is not pacifism, John. We are guardians of peace, but we will ignite our sabers when necessary. The difference is that violence is always our last resort, not our first option. We exhaust every alternative before we strike to kill. John absorbed this, his tactical mind working through the implications. So, in the facility, we attempt negotiation first. Offer them the chance to surrender peacefully. Only engage in combat if they threaten the hostages or refuse to release them. Exactly. But what if negotiation gives them time to hurt the children? What if talking costs lives? Zar had no easy answer to that. It was the eternal dilemma of the Jedi, the balance between ideals and pragmatism, between what should be and what is. Then we trust in the Force to guide us to the right decision in that moment. Our intentions matter as much as our actions, John. The Force responds to why we fight, not just how we fight. The Padawan was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll try to remember that. But Master, if it comes down to choosing between Jedi principles and saving those children's lives, I know which choice I'll make. I know, Zar replied softly. That's what concerns me. The Ojoster sector emerged from hyperspace as a graveyard of forgotten industry. Dozens of abandoned mining stations drifted in slow orbits around depleted asteroids, their lights long dead, their corridors silent. This far from Republic patrols and major hyperspace routes, it was the perfect location for illicit operations. Pirates used such places as bases, smugglers as waypoints, and apparently someone had found use for them as secret facilities. Scanning for life signs, the freighter captain announced from a cockpit. Got something on the third station in the cluster. Power signatures too. Someone's running generators. Could be your people. John and Zar moved to the cockpit viewport, studying the station through the transparisteel. It was a standard Republic mining platform from decades ago, modular construction, designed to be expanded as operations grew. Most of its sections showed signs of decay and damage, but one wing glowed with functioning lights and actively vented atmosphere. Signs of recent habitation. Can you get us closer without triggering their sensors? John asked. The captain, a grizzled Duros with more scars than teeth, grunted. Kid, I've been running blockades since before you were born. I can get you close enough to kiss the hull if you're paying. They approached on a trajectory that mimicked debris drift, powered down to minimal emissions. As they drew within a kilometer, John reached out with the Force, extending his senses toward the station. What he felt made his blood run cold. Children. At least a dozen young minds, their Force presence dampened but still detectable. Fear, confusion, and resignation radiated from them like heat from fire. And around them, darker presences, adults trained in the Force, their signatures carefully controlled but unmistakably touched by the dark side. They're there, John confirmed quietly. The children. But whoever is holding them knows how to use the Force. This isn't a simple slaver operation. Dark Jedi, Zar said grimly. Or former Sith. The question is, what are they doing with Force-sensitive children? They docked at an abandoned airlock on the station's far side, using a portable cutting torch to breach the sealed door. The interior corridors were dark and cold, illuminated only by their glow rods. Rust and decay marked every surface. The air tasted stale despite their breath masks, recycled through failing life support systems that should have been replaced years ago. John moved through the darkness with the confidence of someone in their element. He'd studied station layouts, knew the standard Republic mining platform design. The inhabited section would be in the central hub, where environmental systems could be concentrated. They had approximately 400 meters to cover through abandoned corridors before reaching active areas. They encountered the first body after 200 meters. It was a human male, mid-30s, wearing the tattered remains of a mining jumpsuit. He'd been dead for weeks, his body preserved by the cold. But what caught John's attention was the wound, a precise lightsaber burn through the chest, the kind of killing strike that spoke of trained efficiency. "They've been here longer than we thought," John murmured. "This was probably a squatter or salvager who stumbled onto their operation." "Which means they're willing to kill to protect their secret," Zar added. "Stay alert." They pressed forward, reaching the sealed blast door that marked the boundary between dead station and living facility. John could hear machinery humming beyond, feel the warmth of functioning environmental systems. He placed his hand against the door, reaching out with the force, mapping the layout beyond through the living presences he sensed. 12 children in what was probably the main barracks area, he reported quietly. 2 adults with them, guards, I think. 4 more adults scattered through the facility. And he frowned, concentrating. Something else. A presence that feels different. Older. Powerful. The leader, Zar concluded. Whoever organized this operation. "John, we should observe longer. Gather more intelligence before." The blast door suddenly hissed open. Standing on the other side was a human woman in dark robes, her lightsaber already ignited and burning crimson in her hand. Her eyes held the yellow tint of the dark side, and her smile was predatory. "Jedi," she purred. "How predictable. The moment children go missing, you come running to save them. It's almost touching how reliably compassionate you are." Behind her, 2 more Darksiders emerged from side corridors, their own lightsabers igniting. Red blades cast dancing shadows across rust-stained walls. John's hand moved to his training saber, but Zar raised a hand to stop him. The master stepped forward, his voice calm and measured. "Release the children. Whatever purpose you have for them, it ends now. Surrender peacefully, and you will be treated fairly under Republic law." The woman laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "There's that famous Jedi mercy. Tell me, Master, do you truly believe we'll simply hand over years of work because you ask nicely? These children are the future. We're training them properly, without the Jedi's weak philosophies. They'll be warriors of the true force, unbound by your pathetic codes." "They're children," John said, his voice hard. "You're slavers with lightsabers. Nothing more." The woman's eyes fixed on him, and her smile widened. "A Padawan with spirit. Good. You'll make an excellent example of what happens when Jedi interfere." She raised her blade. "Kill the master. The boy will keep. He can watch what we do to those who resist and learn proper fear." 3 crimson blades moved as one, and the corridor exploded into violence. Master Zar's lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss of blue plasma meeting air, the blade casting sharp shadows in the confined corridor. John's training saber activated a heartbeat later, its lower-powered blades still lethal in skilled hands. The force surged around them as 3 Darksiders attacked with coordinated precision that spoke of practiced teamwork. The woman led the assault with Makashi's elegant precision, her crimson blade seeking Zar's heart in a textbook thrust. The Jedi Master deflected with Sorisa's tight defensive arc, his movements economical and controlled. But the 2 flanking Darksiders immediately pressed forward, forcing him to divide his attention. John moved without thinking, his tactical mind processing the combat geometry instantly. Confined corridor meant limited maneuvering. 3 opponents meant they'd try to overwhelm through numbers. The goal wasn't to win decisively, it was to create space for extraction or reinforcements. He intercepted the leftmost attacker, a Zabrak male whose aggressive Ataru leaps were poorly suited for the cramped space. John's Makashi countered with precise strikes to vulnerable points, forcing the Zabrak to defend rather than press his attack. Each parry positioned John closer to the wall, where his smaller size became an advantage, making him harder to flank. "John," Zar called out, "remember your training. Let the Force guide." The woman's blade nearly took the master's head off, forcing him to abandon instruction for survival. Her skill was formidable, clearly trained by someone who understood classical lightsaber forms. She combined Makashi's precision with unexpected geo-aggression, switching styles mid-sequence to exploit openings. Jon felt his opponent's blade coming for his shoulder through the Force's whisper of danger. He ducked, rolled forward beneath the strike, and came up inside the Zobrik's guard. His training saber's lower power meant it wouldn't kill, but properly applied to a nerve cluster, it could incapacitate. He struck for the Zobrik's weapon arm with surgical precision. The Darksider howled in pain, his lightsaber clattering to the deck as his arm went numb. Jon kicked the weapon away, then drove his shoulder into the Zobrik's midsection, using momentum to slam him into the corridor wall. The impact drove the air from his opponent's lungs, leaving him gasping. 1 down, 2 to go. But the woman had anticipated this. The moment her companion fell, she disengaged from Zar and thrust her hand toward Jon. Dark side energy crackled through the Force, and Jon felt invisible fingers close around his throat. He gasped, fighting the telekinetic grip, but she was too strong, too skilled. Predictable Jedi tactics, she hissed, lifting Jon off his feet. Save the weak, protect the innocent, and die for your compassion. Your master taught you well. Zar moved instantly, his lightsaber describing a complex pattern that forced the woman to release Jon or lose her head. She chose survival, breaking her Force grip to defend. Jon dropped hard, his throat aching, but his mind already calculating next moves. The third Darksider, a human male with a scarred face, pressed Zar hard, his gems so power attacks forcing the Jedi Master backward. Each strike carried enough force to crack bones if it connected with flesh. Zar defended admirably, but he was on the defensive, unable to counterattack effectively while facing 2 opponents. Jon struggled to his feet, reaching for his training saber. Through the Force, he felt something beyond the immediate fight, the children still in the barracks area, their fear spiking as they sensed the violence nearby. And something else, that powerful presence he'd detected earlier, now moving purposefully toward the combat. Master. Jon called out. Someone else is coming. Someone strong. I know, Zar replied through gritted teeth, deflecting another massive strike from the gem, so practitioner. We need to disengage, regroup. The corridor's far blast door exploded inward with a tremendous force push, metal shrieking as it tore from its housing. Through the smoke and debris walked a figure that made Jon's instincts scream danger. He was human, perhaps 50 standard years old. His dark robes immaculate, despite the station's decay. His face bore the aristocratic features of someone born to Coruscant's upper levels, but his eyes held the yellow-tinged corruption of the dark side. Most tellingly, the lightsaber at his belt remained unignited. He didn't need it yet. His presence in the Force was like standing near an abyss, dark and deep and hungry. Enough, the man said, his voice cultured and calm. Stand down, all of you. The Darksiders immediately disengaged, stepping back with the discipline of trained subordinates. The woman actually bowed slightly, her earlier predatory confidence replaced by deference. Master Sullus, she said respectfully. These Jedi infiltrated the station. I was handling. You were failing, Sullus interrupted mildly. A Jedi Master and a Padawan defeated 3 of you in seconds. This does not speak well of your training, Kayla. His eyes moved to study Jon and Zar, and Jon felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing. Although I'll admit, this is no ordinary Padawan. Zar positioned himself slightly in front of Jon, his lightsaber still ignited and ready. Sullus. I know that name. You were a Jedi once, trained at the temple on Coruscant. You left the Order 20 years ago, during the Mandalorian Wars. The Council believed you died. I transcended, Sullus corrected. The Jedi are shackles masters are. Noble shackles perhaps, decorated with fine words about peace and justice, but shackles nonetheless. I chose freedom. Freedom to use the Force as it was meant to be used, as a tool of power, not a philosophy of weakness. And kidnapping children? Jon interjected, his voice sharp despite the danger. That's your freedom? Terrifying families and stealing futures. Sullus's attention fixed fully on Jon, and the Padawan felt those dark eyes dissecting him, analyzing, understanding. Fascinating. You speak of missions and objectives. You assess combat like a military tactician. You're Jedi trained, but you think like a soldier. He smiled. Tell me, young one, what's your name? John. Well, John, I'm not stealing futures. I'm creating them. These children you're so desperate to save? They're force-sensitive, born with gifts that the Jedi would chain and control. The Order would teach them to suppress their emotions, to deny their passions, to be servants of the Republic rather than masters of their own destiny. I offer them something better, true power, unbound by dogma. You're training them as Sith, Zar said flatly. Sith, Dark Jedi, Force Adepts. Labels are irrelevant. Sullus waved a dismissive hand. I'm training them to survive in a galaxy that doesn't care about them. The Republic failed these children first. The families, Antares you interviewed. John, do you think the Republic cared about their missing younglings? Of course not. Lower city lives don't matter to senators and bureaucrats. I gave those children purpose. John felt anger rising, hot and fierce in his chest. The Force responded to it, surging through his muscles, sharpening his senses. You gave them slavery. You took them from their families without consent, trained them in darkness, and justified it with philosophy. You're a slaver with better vocabulary. Sullus's smile widened. Such passion. Such clarity of conviction. The Jedi are wasting you, John. You see the galaxy as it truly is, a place where strength determines survival, where noble intentions mean nothing without power to enforce them. Join me. Train properly. Become what you were meant to be, a warrior, not a monk. I am a Jedi, John replied, and despite his doubts, despite his constant conflict with Jedi philosophy, the words rang with conviction. And I'm taking those children home. No, Sullus said simply, and the Force exploded outward from him. John felt himself lifted and thrown backward with crushing force. He slammed into the corridor wall hard enough to crack his ribs, the impact driving the air from his lungs. His training saber flew from his hand, clattering away down the corridor. Through pain and disorientation, he saw Zar suffering the same treatment. The Jedi Master hurled aside like a toy. Sullus walked forward calmly, his hands clasped behind his back. I've been trained by beings far more powerful than your council masters, young Jedi. I studied under Sith holocrons recovered from Korriban. I learned from the teachings of Exar Kuin and Freedon Nad. 20 years of research and practice, without the Jedi Code holding me back. He stopped before John, looking down at the struggling Padawan. You cannot win this fight. John coughed, tasting blood. His tactical mind ran through scenarios desperately. They were outmatched. Sullus was right. In terms of raw power and experience, this was no contest. 3 Darksiders plus a former Jedi Master against 1 Jedi and 1 Padawan. The odds were impossible. But impossible odds just meant you needed to change the conditions. You're right, John gasped out. We can't beat you. Not in a straight fight. Finally, some wisdom, Sullus began. John's hand shot out, channeling the Force through pure desperation and will. Not toward Sullus, toward the corridor's environmental control panel 15 meters away. His telekinesis was crude, untrained for precision work, but he didn't need precision. He needed destruction. The panel exploded in a shower of sparks and flame. Emergency systems triggered immediately, klaxons wailing as fire suppression protocols activated. More importantly, the blast doors at both ends of the corridor began cycling closed. Safety protocols to contain environmental breaches. Master Zar. John shouted. The children. Zar understood instantly. While Sullus and his Darksiders were trapped on this side of the closing blast door, the path to the barracks area was temporarily clear. The Jedi Master surged to his feet, despite his injuries, called his lightsaber to his hand with the Force, and sprinted for the far door before it sealed. Sullus snarled, reaching out with the Force to stop him. But John tackled the Darksider's legs, a purely physical attack that no amount of Force training defended against. They both went down in a tangle of limbs. John knew he had seconds at most before Sullus simply killed him, but seconds were all Zar needed. The Jedi Master disappeared through the closing door just before it sealed with a heavy thunk. Sullus threw John off him with contemptuous ease, the Padawan slamming into the wall again. The Darksider stood, brushing dust from his robes, his expression more annoyed than angry. Clever, Sullus admitted. Sacrificing yourself to buy time for the rescue. Very noble. Very Jedi. Also very pointless. He gestured, and the three Darksiders moved to flank John. The doors will open again in minutes once the fire suppression completes. Your master will face a dozen Darksiders waiting in ambush when he tries to evacuate the children. You've accomplished nothing except ensuring you die first. John struggled to his feet, every movement sending pain through his cracked ribs. His training saber was gone. His master was on the other side of a sealed door. He was alone, unarmed, and facing 4 dark side force users who could kill him with a thought. The tactical situation was hopeless. So he changed the mission parameters. I didn't sacrifice myself, John said quietly. I bought time. The difference matters. Sullus frowned. Time for what? John reached into his belt pouch and pulled out a small device, a Republic emergency beacon, standard issue for Jedi operating in dangerous territory. He'd activated it the moment they detected the station. 24 hours ago. For reinforcements, John said, and allowed himself a small, cold smile. You were right about one thing. I think like a soldier. And soldiers call for backup before entering hostile territory. As if on cue, the station's hull reverberated with the unmistakable sound of multiple ships docking. Through the Force, John felt new presences arriving, Jedi, at least a dozen of them, led by signatures he recognized from Dantooine. Master Vrook's voice crackled over the station's compromised comm system. This is the Jedi Order. Surrender peacefully or face immediate action. You have 1 minute to comply. Sullus's expression darkened, the cultured facade cracking to reveal genuine anger beneath. You called them before you even entered the station. Standard tactical protocol, John replied. Never enter hostile environment without air support and extraction plan. You said I was Jedi trained, but thought like a soldier. You were right. And that's exactly why you're going to lose. The Darksider's lightsaber finally ignited, its crimson blade humming with barely contained rage. Perhaps. But you won't live to see it. John didn't have a weapon. Didn't have backup yet. Didn't have anything except his training, his connection to the Force, and the absolute certainty that those children were going home today. Sometimes that was enough. The crimson blade descended toward John with killing intent, and the universe seemed to slow. Through the Force, he felt every molecule of air in the corridor, every vibration through the deck plating, every heartbeat of the 4 Darksiders surrounding him. His tactical mind processed angles and vectors with crystal clarity even as his body moved on pure instinct. He dropped flat, Sullus's lightsaber passing centimeters above his head and scoring a molten line across the corridor wall. John rolled left as Kayla's blade stabbed down where he'd been, then kicked out with both legs, catching the Zabrak, still recovering from his injured arm, in the knee. The joint buckled with a sickening crack. 2 Darksiders down or injured. 2 still combat effective, and one of them was a former Jedi Master with decades of experience. John scrambled backward, putting distance between himself and Sullus. The station shuddered again as more Jedi ships docked. Through the sealed blast door, he heard the muffled sounds of combat. Master Zar must have encountered resistance in the barracks section. The children were still trapped, still in danger. Impressive reflexes, Sullus acknowledged, circling John like a predator. But you're unarmed and outnumbered. Surrender now, and I'll make your death quick. Fight, and I'll ensure you suffer before the end. Jedi don't surrender to darkness, John replied, reaching deep into the Force. His connection had always been different from other Padawans, less mystical communion, more tactical integration. Now he pushed that connection further, treating the Force like a weapon system he needed to master immediately or die. The training saber he dropped earlier was 15 meters away, resting against the corridor wall. Too far to reach physically. But through the Force, he'd practiced telekinesis countless times under supervision, moving training remotes and meditation crystals with careful control. This was different. This required power and speed, not precision. Jon visualized the saber as a projectile, calculated the trajectory, and pulled with everything he had. The training saber flew through the air like a missile, its hilt smacking into Jon's outstretched palm. He activated it immediately, the lower-powered blue blade igniting just in time to deflect Kayla's strike. The impact sent numbing vibrations up his injured arm, but he held firm. Resourceful, Sullus noted, but still insufficient. The former Jedi Master extended both hands, and dark side lightning erupted from his fingertips. Jon barely got his blade up in time, the training saber's plasma edge absorbing most of the deadly energy, but some arced through, burning across his shoulder and chest. He screamed, the pain unlike anything he'd experienced, every nerve ending on fire. Through the agony, Jon's tactical mind provided cold assessment. Force lightning was Sullus's preferred execution method. It required concentration and direct line of sight. Disrupting either would stop the attack. Jon threw himself sideways into a roll, breaking the lightning's connection. His shoulder screamed protest, burned flesh grinding against his tunic. He came up behind a support strut, using it for cover, and reached out with the force toward the corridor's damaged environmental panel. The panel had started a small electrical fire when he destroyed it earlier. Now he fed that fire, encouraging it with telekinesis, spreading it along the walls where exposed wiring created perfect fuel. Flames erupted with sudden intensity, filling the corridor with thick black smoke. Visibility dropped to nearly zero. But Jedi and Darksiders didn't need eyes to fight. Jon moved through the smoke like a ghost, using the Force to sense positions rather than sight. He felt Sullus's presence, dark and powerful, searching for him. Felt Kayla moving to flank. The Scar Gems so practitioner positioning to cut off escape routes. But they expected him to retreat, to seek escape or wait for Jedi reinforcements to break through. They didn't expect him to attack. Jon emerged from the smoke directly beside the Gem-So fighter, his training saber striking low and fast for the man's weapon hand. The Darksider barely blocked, surprise slowing his reaction. Jon pressed the advantage, channeling the Force through his strikes, making each blow hit harder than his 12-year-old frame should manage. Makashi form against Gem-So power. Precision versus strength. In an extended duel, the larger opponent would win through attrition. But Jon wasn't dueling. He was executing a tactical strike designed to disable quickly. He feinted high, drew the expected overhead block, then dropped and swept the man's legs. As the Darksider fell, Jon's training saber found the gap in his guard, pressing against his throat. Yield, Jon commanded. The man's eyes widened with rage, then calculation. Slowly, he deactivated his lightsaber. 3 down. Kayla's blade erupted from the smoke, nearly taking Jon's head off. He ducked purely on Force instinct, feeling the heat of the crimson blade pass above him. Her next strike came impossibly fast. She'd been holding back before, testing him. Now she fought to kill. Jon defended desperately, his Sarisu training pushed to its limits. Each block came a fraction of a second late. Each parry cost him ground. His injured ribs made breathing agony. His burned shoulder reduced his left arm to near uselessness. He was losing. Then the corridor's far blast door exploded inward with a massive force push, and Master Vrook strode through with 4 Jedi Knights at his back, their lightsabers blazing blue and green in the smoke-filled darkness. Surrender immediately, Vrook commanded, his voice carrying the full authority of the Jedi Council. Kayla hesitated, looking to Sullus. The former Jedi Master stood motionless, calculating odds. 5 Jedi Knights, plus whatever forces were flooding the rest of the station. His operation was compromised. His students defeated or captured. The tactical situation had shifted decisively against him. This isn't over, Sullus said quietly, his eyes fixed on Jon. You've won today, young Padawan. But you proved my point in the process. You didn't defeat me through Jedi philosophy or meditation or surrendering to the Force's will. You won through tactical thinking, aggressive action, and military doctrine. You're more like me than you want to admit. Before anyone could respond, Sullus thrust both hands toward the corridor's outer hull. Dark side energy exploded outward with catastrophic force, tearing a massive breach in the station structure. Atmosphere vented explosively, dragging loose equipment and debris toward the void. John felt himself being pulled toward the breach, his grip on consciousness failing as pain and exhaustion overwhelmed him. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Master Vrook's robes billowing as the Jedi Master used the Force to seal the hull breach, and Kayla being dragged away by 2 Jedi Knights. Sullus was gone, escaped into the void somehow, his dark presence fading from John's 4 senses as unconsciousness finally took him. John woke in the medical bay of a Republic cruiser, back to bandages covering his burned shoulder and chest. The familiar thrum of hyperspace engines told him they were in transit. He tried to sit up, but gentle hands pressed him back down. "Easy, young one," Master Vander's voice said softly. "You've been unconscious for 2 days. Your injuries were severe." "The children," John managed through a dry throat. "Did we?" "All rescued safely," Vandar assured him. Master Zar reached them before Sullus's followers could use them as hostages. They're en route back to their families on Taris even now. You succeeded in your mission. Relief flooded through John, sweet and overwhelming. They'd saved them. Despite impossible odds. Despite facing a former Jedi Master and trained Darksiders, the children were safe. The mission was complete. Sullus escaped, John said, the tactical failure gnawing at him despite the victory. Yes, Vandar acknowledged. And captured 3 of his followers, including Kayla. They're in custody and will face Republic justice. We also discovered extensive records of his operation, holocrons he'd collected, training methods, lists of other potential targets. The intelligence will help us prevent future abductions. John nodded, processing this. Then a thought struck him. Master Vandar, Sullus said something before he escaped. He said I won through tactical thinking and military doctrine, not through Jedi philosophy. He said I was more like him than I wanted to admit. The ancient Jedi Master was quiet for a long moment, his wizened face thoughtful. Finally he spoke. Sullus is both right and wrong. You do think tactically, and you approach problems like a soldier. This is true. But John, why did you fight? To save the children. And when you sacrificed yourself to buy time for Master Zar, what motivated that decision? John considered this carefully. The children's safety was more important than my survival. The mission required someone to delay Sullus while the extraction proceeded. And when you could have killed your opponents, you had opportunities, I'm certain. Why didn't you? Because... John paused, realizing the answer as he spoke it. Because incapacitating them was sufficient to achieve the objective. Killing wasn't necessary. Vander's ears lifted slightly, a sign of satisfaction. There is your answer. Yes, you think like a soldier. But you fight for others, you sacrifice for the innocent, and you choose mercy when possible. These are Jedi principles, John, even if you arrived at them through tactical analysis rather than philosophical meditation. The Force works through each of us differently. Your path may not look like traditional Jedi training, but if it leads you to protect the weak and serve the galaxy, then it is a valid path. But the Council, Master Vrook especially, they think I'm too aggressive, too focused on victory. Master Vrook thinks many things, Vandar said with a hint of amusement. But even he cannot deny your success on this mission. You identified patterns authorities missed. You infiltrated a hostile facility. You called for reinforcements before engaging superior forces. You sacrificed yourself to protect hostages. And you showed mercy to defeated enemies. The ancient master placed a small hand on John's uninjured shoulder. These are the actions of a true Jedi, regardless of how you arrived at them. John absorbed this, feeling something shift in his understanding. Perhaps he didn't need to choose between being a soldier and being a Jedi. Perhaps he could be both, a guardian who fought when necessary, protected always, and used tactical thinking in service of Jedi ideals rather than in opposition to them. What happens now? John asked. Now you recover. Then we return to Dantooine, where the council will formally recognize your actions. And John, Vander's expression grew serious. The council has decided you're ready to begin training for your trials. What you faced on that station, the combat, the moral choices, the sacrifice, these are the challenges that define a Jedi. You passed them at 12 years old. It's time to acknowledge that you're no longer a youngling learning basic forms. You're becoming something more. Pride surged through John, fierce and warm. But beneath it was something else. The memory of Sullus's words, the unsettling recognition that his way of thinking, his tactical approach, could serve either light or dark depending on his choices. Master, John said quietly, Sullus offered me power, freedom from Jedi restrictions. He saw something in me that resonated with darkness. What if he was right? What if my way of thinking makes me vulnerable to the dark side? Vander's expression softened with compassion. Every Jedi faces that fear, John. Every one of us has aspects of our nature that could be twisted toward darkness. But here is the truth that Sullus forgot. It is not our abilities or our methods that define us. It is our choices. You chose to save children over personal glory. You chose mercy over vengeance. You chose sacrifice over self-preservation. These choices matter more than any philosophy or training method. And if I'm ever tempted, if the dark side offers me power when I need it to save people, then you remember this moment, Vander said firmly. You remember that you already succeeded without falling to darkness. You remember that true strength comes not from unlimited power, but from knowing when to act and when to restrain yourself. And most importantly, you remember that you are not alone. The Jedi Order stands with you, guides you, and will help you stay in the light no matter how dark the path becomes. John nodded slowly, accepting the wisdom, even as part of him recognized the challenges ahead. Sullus was still out there, probably rebuilding his operation, training more Darksiders. The Sith were scattered but not destroyed. The galaxy remained dangerous, and children remained vulnerable. But he was a Jedi. And Jedi didn't abandon their missions just because they were difficult. When do we begin training for the trials? John asked. Vander's eyes crinkled with approval. As soon as you can stand without collapsing, young warrior. Rest now. The Force has great plans for you, and you'll need your strength for what's coming. As the ancient master left the medical bay, John stared at the ceiling, feeling the gentle pulse of hyperspace around him. The distant presence of rescued children sleeping peacefully in other quarters, and the faint echo of Sullus's dark presence somewhere in the galaxy, waiting for their inevitable next encounter. The Force had brought him to this galaxy for a reason. Now he was beginning to understand what that reason might be, not to choose between soldier and Jedi, but to forge a new path that combined both. A guardian who understood tactics, a warrior who served peace. A Jedi who never left anyone behind. The galaxy needed protectors who could stand against the darkness without becoming it. John intended to be exactly that, no matter how long the journey took. 5 years passed with the relentless inevitability of Dantooine seasons. John grew from a boy into a young man, his frame filling out with the lean muscle of constant training. His face losing its youthful softness to reveal sharp features marked by focus and determination. At 17 standard years, he stood before the Jedi Council for what would be the most important conversation of his life. The council chamber on Dantooine was smaller than the legendary one on Coruscant, but no less imposing. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the semicircle of masters who represented the Order's wisdom and authority. Master Vander sat in the center, flanked by Vrook, Zar, and 3 visiting council members from the Coruscant Temple, Master Kaver, Master Atreides, and Master Zezkael. John knelt in the traditional pose of supplication, his Padawan braid hanging beside his right ear, the last external symbol of his incomplete training. Today would determine whether that braid would be cut, whether he would rise as a Jedi Knight or remain a student. John, Master Vander began, his ancient voice carrying weight and warmth equally. You stand before this council having completed the trials of skill, courage, and flesh. Your performance on Taris 5 years ago demonstrated abilities beyond your years. Your subsequent training has been exemplary. Master Zar speaks highly of your progress. Thank you, Master, John replied, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. Master Vrook leaned forward, his stern expression unchanged by the passing years. However, there remain concerns. Your approach to the Force is unconventional. You treat meditation as tactical preparation. You study combat forms with the dedication of a soldier rather than a guardian. You have repeatedly questioned council decisions when they conflict with your own assessment of optimal strategy. John had expected this. Vrook had never fully approved of his methods, viewing them as too aggressive, too focused on victory. Master Vrook, with respect, the galaxy doesn't care about conventional approaches. Enemies don't pause their attacks to let us meditate. The dark side doesn't wait for permission before striking. I study tactics because understanding how to fight effectively means I'm better equipped to protect the innocent. And there's the core issue. Master Atreides interjected, her voice cool and measured. She was younger than the other masters, perhaps 40 standard years. Her beauty matched by legendary dedication to Jedi orthodoxy. You speak of fighting, of enemies, of optimal strategy. A Jedi's first thought should be peace, diplomacy, understanding, not combat efficiency. Peace is the goal, John agreed. But Master Atreides, how many Jedi died during the Mandalorian Wars because they weren't prepared for enemies who showed no mercy? How many died in the Jedi Civil War because they couldn't imagine their own brothers and sisters turning to darkness? Hoping for peace while preparing for war isn't contradiction, it's wisdom. Master Kaver, a warrior himself with a legendary reputation, stroked his beard thoughtfully. You make a valid point. The Order has historically struggled when forced into prolonged conflict. We are peacekeepers by nature, not soldiers. Perhaps someone who thinks differently could help prevent future tragedies. Or could lead us down the same path that claimed Revan and Malak. Atreides countered sharply. They too believed they knew better than the Council. They too prioritized victory over adherence to our principles. We know how that ended. The comparison struck John like a physical blow. Revan, the legendary Jedi, who'd fallen to darkness while fighting the Mandalorians, who'd become a Sith Lord and nearly destroyed the Republic before somehow returning to the light. The ultimate cautionary tale of good intentions corrupted by the dark side. I am not Revan, John said quietly, but with absolute conviction. I don't seek power for its own sake. I don't believe the ends justify any means. I fight to protect people, and I submit to the Council's authority even when I disagree with their decisions. That's the difference between a guardian and a conqueror. Do you? Vrook challenged. On Taris, you called for reinforcements before consulting with your master. You engaged Darksiders despite orders to observe and report. You made strategic decisions that put yourself at risk without Council approval. These actions suggest someone who prioritizes their own judgment over proper authority. Those actions saved 12 children's lives, John replied, his tactical mind engaging despite knowing this was partly a test of his emotional control. If I'd waited for full Council approval, the children would have been moved or killed. Sometimes the right decision requires acting on incomplete information with available resources. That's not arrogance, it's accepting responsibility for outcomes. Master Zizkael, who'd remained silent until now, spoke with a voice that carried the weight of hard-earned experience. The Padawan makes a difficult point. We've lost Jedi to both excessive caution and reckless aggression. The question isn't whether John's methods are orthodox. It's whether his heart remains true to Jedi ideals. Can someone fight like a soldier while serving like a Jedi? That is precisely what we must determine, Vandar agreed. John, there remains one final trial, the trial of spirit. You must venture into the depths of your own consciousness, confront what you fear most, and emerge with clarity about who you truly are. Only then can this council determine if you're ready to bear the title of Jedi Knight. John bowed his head in acceptance. The trial of spirit was infamous among Padawans, a deeply personal journey into one's own psyche, facing inner demons and buried fears. Some emerged enlightened. Others broke under the weight of what they discovered about themselves. "When do I begin?" John asked. "Immediately," Vandar replied. The caves beneath the enclave contain strong concentrations of force energy. You will enter alone, unarmed, and face whatever the force shows you. Emerge with understanding, and you will have passed your final trial. The caves beneath the enclave were ancient, their walls worn smooth by millennia of underground water flow. Crystals grew from the ceiling and floor, their surfaces catching the dim light of bioluminescent fungi and refracting it into dancing patterns. The air was cool and damp, carrying the mineral smell of deep earth and the subtle hum of the force concentrated in this place. John walked deeper into the darkness, his breathing controlled, his mind focused. He'd left his training saber behind as instructed, wearing only his simple Padawan robes. The force pressed against him from all sides, not threatening, but insistent, like the galaxy itself wanted his attention. The tunnel opened into a large cavern, its center dominated by a pool of perfectly still water that reflected the crystal formations above. John approached carefully, his tactical senses screaming that this was the place, this was where the trial would manifest. His reflection stared back at him from the water's surface. For a moment, it was just him, 17 years old, focused, determined. Then, the reflection changed. The figure in the water wore black armor, unlike anything the Star Wars galaxy had ever seen. Green-tinted faceplate, powerful shoulders, weapons that looked more advanced than anything the Republic or Sith possessed. The armor was familiar in ways John couldn't articulate, triggering memories that existed more as feeling than knowledge. Mjolnir, John whispered, though he didn't know how he knew the word. Spartan. The reflection moved independently now, standing at attention. When it spoke, the voice was his own, but processed through armor systems, mechanical and cold. "This is what you were supposed to become," the reflection said. "Before the Force took you. Before the Jedi made you soft with their philosophies. You were meant to be a weapon, perfectly designed, absolutely efficient. The Spartan program would have augmented you, made you faster, stronger, better. Instead, you waste time meditating and debating ethics." "I'm a Jedi," John replied, though doubt crept into his voice. "I protect people. That's what matters." The reflection laughed, harsh and bitter. "You protect people by being weaker than you could be? By limiting yourself with codes and counsels? How many have died because you hesitated, because you followed orders instead of trusting your tactical judgment? Antares, you called for reinforcements, but what if they hadn't arrived in time? What if those children died while you waited for permission to act?" John stepped closer to the pool, drawn despite himself. "They didn't die. We saved them." This time, the reflection countered. But Sullus escaped. He's still out there, taking more children, building more Darksiders. You had the opportunity to kill him when he was distracted. One telekinetic strike, crushing his throat or stopping his heart. It would have ended the threat permanently. Instead, you let him go. And how many will suffer because of that mercy? The water rippled, and the scene changed. John saw himself older, wearing Jedi robes, but carrying himself like a soldier. He watched as his older self led Jedi into battle against Sith forces, his tactics brilliant, his strategies saving countless lives. But there was something wrong with the vision. The older John's eyes held yellow tints, dark side corruption seeping in at the edges. "This is your future if you don't choose," another voice said. John spun to find a second figure emerging from the shadows, Master Sullus, exactly as he'd appeared on the station 5 years ago. "I wondered if you'd appear," John said quietly. "The trial shows us our fears. You represent what I might become, someone who uses the Force as a weapon without restraint." "I represent power without apology," Sullus corrected. "The Jedi fill your head with restrictions, but you know the truth. You've always known it. Victory matters more than philosophy. Protecting the innocent requires strength, and strength requires embracing every tool available, including the dark side when necessary." The water showed more visions. Jon watched himself make impossible choices, sacrificing allies to achieve objectives, using dark side powers to overcome superior enemies, slowly becoming the very thing he fought against. But interspersed with the darkness were moments of triumph. Children saved, battles won, peace secured through overwhelming force. The ends justify the means, the Sullus figure whispered. You could save so many if you just accepted your true nature. Stop pretending to be something you're not. You're a warrior, not a monk. Embrace it. Jon closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the visions, the temptation of unlimited power in service of righteous goals. It would be so easy. The dark side offered shortcuts to everything the Jedi achieved slowly through discipline and restraint. He could save more people, prevent more suffering, if he just... No, Jon said quietly, opening his eyes. The Sullus figure frowned. No. You're right that I'm a warrior. You're right that I think tactically and prioritize victory. But you're wrong about what that means. Jon turned to face the reflection in the water, seeing both the Spartan armor and his own Jedi robes superimposed. I don't need to choose between being a soldier and being a Jedi. The best soldiers don't just win battles, they know which battles to fight. They understand that some victories cost more than they're worth. They protect their people not just with strength, but with wisdom about when to use that strength. Weakness, the Sullus figure spat. Discipline, Jon corrected. Any fool can unleash maximum force and damn the consequences. It takes real strength to hold back when you could destroy, to show mercy when you could kill, to accept a harder victory that preserves your principles instead of an easy one that corrupts your soul. The visions in the water shifted again. Now Jon saw himself as he could be, older, experienced, wearing Jedi robes, but moving with a warrior's confidence. His eyes remained clear, uncorrupted, but they held the hardness of someone who'd faced darkness and refused to yield. He led other Jedi in battle, yes, but his tactical brilliance saved lives on both sides, finding solutions that didn't require senseless slaughter. This is who I'm meant to become, Jon said with growing certainty. Not a Jedi who pretends war doesn't exist. Not a warrior who abandons principles for efficiency. Someone who understands both, who can fight when necessary, but never loses sight of why we fight. A guardian in the truest sense, protecting not just lives, but the values that make those lives worth living. The Sullus figure began to fade, its dark presence dissipating like smoke. You'll fail eventually. Everyone does. The galaxy will demand you compromise your principles. And when that day comes, you'll remember this conversation. Maybe, Jon acknowledged. But if I fail, it'll be because I wasn't strong enough to hold the line, not because the line didn't exist. The dark side promises power, but power without purpose is just destruction. I choose purpose. The cavern brightened suddenly, the force energy that had pressed so heavily lifting like fog in sunlight. The pool's surface stilled completely, reflecting only Jon himself, no armor, no corruption, just a young man who'd faced his fears and emerged with clarity. Master Vander's voice echoed through the cavern, carried by the force itself. Well spoken, young one. Return now. Your trial is complete. Jon emerged from the caves as sunset painted Dantooine sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The council awaited him in the enclave's central courtyard, their expressions revealing nothing. He knelt before them, knowing the decision could go either way. He'd been honest in the trial, embraced his nature as a warrior Jedi. But would the council accept that path? Or would they see only another potential Revan, too confident in his own judgment? Master Vandar stepped forward, holding a lightsaber hilt. Not Jon's training saber, but something new. The metal was polished to a mirror finish, the design elegant but functional, built for someone who understood both artistry and efficiency. Jon, Vandar said formally, the council has deliberated. You are unconventional, yes. You think like a soldier, fight like a warrior, and question authority when you believe lives are at stake. These traits have concerned us greatly. Jon's heart sank. This sounded like a rejection. However, Vandar continued, his expression softening slightly. You have also demonstrated unwavering dedication to protecting the innocent. You show mercy to defeated enemies. You sacrifice yourself for others without hesitation. And most importantly, you faced the dark side's temptation in your trial and chose discipline over power. These are the qualities that define a true Jedi, regardless of methods. The ancient master activated the lightsaber. A brilliant blue blade ignited, its hum perfectly tuned, its light casting sharp shadows across the courtyard. The council recognizes that the order needs diverse perspectives. We need peacekeepers, yes, but we also need those who can stand against darkness without becoming it. We need Jedi who understand warfare but wage it with honor. We need guardians who can make hard choices while keeping their souls intact. Vandar deactivated the blade and extended the hilt toward John. Rise, John. By the right of the council, by the will of the Force, you are now a Jedi Knight. May you serve the galaxy with wisdom, courage, and integrity. May you never forget that being a warrior and being a guardian are not opposites. They are complementary truths that, when balanced, create something greater than either alone. John stood, accepting the lightsaber with hands that trembled slightly despite his control. The weight felt right, perfect, like an extension of himself. He ignited the blade, watching blue plasma spring to life, and felt the Force flow through him with unprecedented clarity. He was a Jedi Knight, a warrior guardian, someone who'd forge his own path while honoring the Order's principles. Master Kaver stepped forward, producing a small blade. Your Padawan blade, Knight John. It's time. John bowed his head, feeling the blade cut through the braid that had marked his student status for years. When he straightened, he was no longer a learner. He was a protector, fully recognized, ready to face whatever challenges the galaxy held. There's one more thing, Master Atri said, her earlier skepticism replaced by cautious respect. The Council has decided to grant you a special assignment. Onderon System. Civil war brewing between Royalists and Separatists. The conflict threatens to destabilize the entire sector. You will go as the Order's representative, attempt to mediate peace, and protect civilians caught in the crossfire. It will test everything you've learned about balancing warfare with guardianship. I accept, John said, without hesitation. As the newly made knight left the council chamber, his lightsaber secured at his belt, Master Vrook turned to Vandar with concern evident in his weathered features. I hope we've made the right decision, Vrook said quietly. He's still young, still idealistic. The galaxy has a way of crushing idealism, especially when combined with warrior instincts. Perhaps, Vandar replied, watching John disappear into the Enclave. Or perhaps he's exactly what the Order needs. Someone who can adapt our ancient wisdom to the galaxy's harsh realities without losing sight of our core purpose. Time will tell. The Force will guide him. Or it will test him until he breaks, Vrook muttered. That, Vandar acknowledged with ancient wisdom, is the fate of all Jedi. We can only hope he's strong enough to bend without breaking. Something tells me, though, that this one is made of sterner stuff than most. Onderon hung in space like a jewel wrapped in thorns, beautiful from orbit, deadly up close. The planet's lush jungles teemed with predatory fauna that had kept civilization confined to walled cities for millennia. The capital, Izais, rose from the wilderness in layers of ancient stone and modern durasteel, its massive walls designed to keep the beast riders and jungle creatures at bay. But the walls couldn't protect against the enemy within. John's Republic shuttle descended through turbulent atmosphere, buffeted by winds that howled across Onderon's equatorial regions. Through the viewport, he could see smoke rising from Izais' outer districts, not the industrial smoke of a thriving city, but the black clouds of burning buildings and civil unrest. The situation had deteriorated faster than Republic intelligence anticipated. Knight John, the pilot called back. I'm receiving contradictory landing permissions. The Royal Palace says we're cleared. The Separatist-controlled spaceport is threatening to shoot us down if we approach. Your call. John studied the tactical display, his mind processing options with the speed of years of training. Take us to the palace. If the Separatists fire, I'll handle it. But I doubt they want to escalate by attacking a marked Republic vessel with a Jedi aboard. Not yet, anyway. The pilot swallowed nervously, but adjusted course. You Jedi and your confidence. Hope you're right. They weren't fired upon, though John sensed weapon systems tracking them through the Force. Hostile intent barely restrained by political calculation. The palace landing platform was heavily guarded. Royal soldiers in ornate armor manning defensive positions with military-grade blasters. As John descended the shuttle's ramp, a protocol droid hurried forward, its movements agitated. Jedi Knight, thank the Maker. Queen Talia has been expecting you. Please, this way immediately. The situation is most dire. John followed the droid through marble corridors that spoke of centuries of royal heritage, past tapestries depicting ancient beast rider victories, and murals showing Onderon's proud history. But beneath the grandeur, he sensed fear and desperation radiating from every guard, every servant, every noble they passed. Queen Talia awaited in her throne room, a woman in her 40s, whose regal bearing couldn't quite hide exhaustion and stress. Her crown sat slightly crooked, as if she'd been wearing it too long without rest. Advisors clustered around her, arguing in heated whispers that cut off the moment John entered. Jedi Knight, Talia said, rising from her throne with obvious relief. You don't know how grateful I am to see you. The Republic promised aid weeks ago, but you're the first actual help to arrive. John bowed respectfully. Your Majesty, I'm here to assess the situation and help broker peace between your government and the Separatist faction. Can you brief me on current conditions? One of her advisors, a sharp-faced general in military dress, stepped forward. Current conditions are simple, Jedi. Traitors control half the city, including the primary spaceport and 3 armories. They're led by Vaklu, the Queen's own cousin, who believes our alliance with the Republic weakens Onderon. He wants isolation, tradition, and his own crown. General Tobin exaggerates. A calmer voice interjected. An elderly diplomat moved forward, his robes marking him as the court's chief negotiator. Vaklu has legitimate grievances. The Republic's trade agreements favor off-world corporations. Our young people leave for opportunities elsewhere. Our military budget has been slashed to fund diplomatic initiatives that yield little return. Many citizens agree with his concerns, even if they don't support his methods. Are his methods violent? John asked directly. The general answered with barely controlled fury. 3 attacks on loyal military convoys. 2 bombings of government buildings. 17 dead, 43 wounded. Yes, Jedi, his methods are violent. And how has the royal government responded? John pressed, sensing there was more to this story. Queen Talia's expression hardened. We've been restrained. We could crush the Separatists militarily. Our forces are better equipped and trained. But they've taken positions in civilian areas. Any assault would cause massive casualties among innocents. We've tried negotiation, but Vaklu demands I abdicate in his favor. That's not negotiation, it's surrender. John felt the complexity of the situation settling over him like a heavy cloak. Both sides believed they were right. Both had valid points. The Royalists wanted stability and Republic protection. The Separatists wanted independence and traditional values. And caught between them were thousands of civilians who just wanted to live their lives in peace. I need to speak with Vaklu, John said, directly, without intermediaries. Can you arrange that? The general looked horrified. That's suicide. The moment you enter Separatist territory, you become a hostage or a target. They hate the Jedi almost as much as they hate the Republic. Which is exactly why I need to go, John replied calmly. If I can survive their territory and speak with Vaklu face to face, it demonstrates that dialogue is possible. If they kill a Jedi Knight sent to negotiate peace, they lose any moral authority for their cause. It's a calculated risk, but necessary. Queen Talia studied him with eyes that had grown hard from making impossible choices. You're young for a Jedi Knight. How old are you? 17, Your Majesty. 17, she repeated softly. My son is 16. I can't send someone your age into that danger with good conscience. Your Majesty, John said with gentle firmness, I'm a Jedi Knight. Age is less relevant than training and capability. I've faced Darksiders, infiltrated hostile stations, and survived situations that would kill most adult soldiers. I can handle Vaklu's separatists. The elderly diplomat nodded approvingly. The boy speaks sense. And perhaps his youth works in our favor. Vaklu might be more willing to speak with someone who isn't an established Republic agent. He might see genuine negotiation rather than political maneuvering. After lengthy debate, Talia agreed. A secure holocom transmission was arranged, and John found himself staring at the flickering blue image of General Vaklu, a man in his 50s with a warrior's build and eyes that burned with absolute conviction. So the Republic sends a child to lecture me about proper governance, Vaklu began, his voice dripping with contempt. How typical. I'm here to listen, not lecture, John replied evenly. You believe Onderon should be independent of Republic influence. I'd like to understand why, directly from you rather than through propaganda or biased reports. Vaklu paused, clearly not expecting that response. You want to understand? Fine. The Republic views Onderon as a resource to be exploited. They want our Beast Rider Corps for their military. They want our manufacturing capacity for their war machine. They want our strategic location to project power in this sector. What they don't want is to actually help our people. Trade agreements benefit their corporations while our workers suffer. Humanitarian aid comes with strings attached. We've become a client state, not an ally. Those are legitimate concerns, John acknowledged, and saw surprise flicker across Vaklu's holographic face. But your methods have killed innocent people. Bombings, ambushes. These aren't the actions of someone fighting for their people. They're the actions of someone pursuing power regardless of cost. 17 casualties versus thousands who'll die slowly under Republic exploitation. Vaklu shot back. I make hard choices so my people have a future. Something a boy playing at being a Jedi couldn't understand. John felt anger rise, but pushed it down with trained discipline. I'm willing to come to your territory unarmed, without guards, to discuss this face to face. If you truly believe in your cause, if you truly want what's best for Onderon, prove it. Meet with me. Maybe we can find a solution that doesn't require more bloodshed. Vaklu was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing tactical considerations. Finally, he nodded. Tomorrow noon at the Merchant Quarter Neutral Zone. You come alone, unarmed as you said. I'll have my people watching. Any sign of treachery, and you die along with any hope of peace. Understood, John agreed. I'll be there. The Merchant Quarter sat on the boundary between Royalist and Separatist territory, a buffer zone where commerce still functioned through mutual agreement that trade benefited everyone. John walked its streets alone as promised, his Jedi robes drawing stares, but no open hostility. He'd left his lightsaber on the shuttle, a calculated gamble that demonstrated trust even as it left him vulnerable. The Force whispered warnings constantly. Sniper positions in windows above. Armed groups in alleyways. Tripwires and improvised explosives placed to channel his movement. Vaklu was taking no chances, probably expecting betrayal despite the negotiations. The designated meeting place was a cafe that had somehow remained neutral territory. Its owner, a pragmatic Twi'lek woman, served both Royalists and Separatists with equal disinterest, caring only about credits and survival. John took a seat at an outdoor table, ordered CAF he didn't intend to drink, and waited. Vaklu arrived with 4 bodyguards, all heavily armed, all positioned to kill John instantly if needed. The general wore military fatigues rather than dress uniform, a statement that he was a soldier first and politician second. He sat across from John, studying him with the calculating gaze of someone used to evaluating threats. You actually came, Vaklu said finally. Unarmed. Either you're incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both, John admitted with a slight smile. But I meant what I said. I want to understand your position and see if there's a way forward that doesn't require a civil war. There is, Vaklu replied bluntly. Talia abdicates. Onderon withdraws from Republic treaties. We return to traditional governance, with the military ensuring security. Simple. Except Talia won't abdicate. Your traditional governance means military dictatorship, and thousands of Andoronians who support the Republic Alliance won't accept your rule without a fight. So instead of simple, you get years of bloody civil war that destroys everything you claim to want to protect. Vaklu's expression darkened. You sound like Talia's propaganda minister. I sound like someone who's seen what civil war does to planets, John corrected. I've walked through cities where civilians starve because farmland became battlefields. I've seen families torn apart because children chose different sides than parents. War isn't glorious political statements and strategic victories. It's suffering on a scale that makes your current casualties look insignificant. Then convince Talia to step aside peacefully. Why should she? She's the legitimate queen, supported by probably half the population. You're asking her to surrender her throne and her people's choice of government because you disagree with their decisions. That's not leadership. It's tyranny dressed in patriotic rhetoric. For a moment, John thought Vaklu might simply order his execution. The general's hand moved toward his holstered blaster, and the bodyguards tensed. But then something shifted in Vaklu's eyes. Respect, perhaps, or at least acknowledgement that John wasn't a typical Jedi diplomat. You have fire, boy. I can respect that. But respect doesn't change reality. Onderon will be free of Republic control, one way or another. If you truly want to prevent bloodshed, convince your Republic to release us from those exploitative treaties. Give us real independence with your blessing, and this ends peacefully. And if the Republic refuses, then we take independence by force, and the casualties are on your conscience. John leaned forward, his voice dropping to carry only to Vaklu's ears. General, I've read your military record. You fought in the Mandalorian Wars, defended Onderon against raiders, earned every medal and commendation honorably. You're not a murderer or a tyrant. You're a soldier who loves his planet. So tell me truly, without the politics and posturing, what do you really want? Vaklu was quiet for a long moment, and John saw past the hardened revolutionary to the tired warrior beneath. I want Onderon to be Onderon again, he said finally, his voice carrying genuine pain. Not a Republic client state. Not a strategic asset to be used and discarded. I want our young people to have opportunities here, not forced to leave for Republic worlds. I want our traditions honored, not dismissed as primitive. I want. He trailed off, then shook his head. It doesn't matter what I want. It matters what I can achieve. What if there was a third option? John asked carefully. Not full independence, not current treaties. Something in between, reformed agreements that give Onderon real autonomy, while maintaining defensive alliance with the Republic. Trade deals renegotiated to favor local businesses. Cultural preservation written into law. Republic military presence reduced to advisory role rather than occupation force. Talia would never agree to that. She's too committed to Republic integration. She might if the alternative is civil war destroying her planet. And the Republic might agree if the alternative is losing Onderon entirely to isolation or worse, to someone like Vaklu who might turn to the Sith or other anti-Republic powers out of desperation. Vaklu's eyes sharpened. Are you threatening? I'm observing reality, John interrupted. Desperate people make desperate alliances. The Sith might be scattered, but they're always looking for allies. If you pushed hard enough in the wrong direction, you might find support from sources that would corrupt everything you're trying to achieve. I'm offering an alternative, real reform through negotiation rather than revolution through bloodshed. The general sat back, his tactical mind clearly working through possibilities. Even if I agreed, and I'm not saying I do, my followers want action, not more words. They've been promised change for years. How do I convince them to wait for negotiations that might yield nothing? You tell them the truth, John said simply. That change achieved through patience lasts longer than change seized through violence. That building consensus takes time, but creates stable foundation. That real leadership means knowing when to fight and when to negotiate, and having the courage to choose the harder path when it's the right one. For the first time since the conversation began, Vaklu smiled slightly. You argue like a soldier who learned philosophy, not a philosopher who learned to fight. The council must find you frustrating. Constantly, John admitted. But they knighted me anyway. Sometimes the order recognizes that different approaches serve the same ultimate goal. Vaklu stood, his bodyguards immediately tensing. I'll consider what you said. No promises. But if you can actually get Talia and the Republic to negotiate real reforms, not cosmetic changes designed to placate while changing nothing, then maybe we can avoid the bloodbath we're headed toward. You have 1 week to show me something concrete, or negotiations end and war begins in earnest. I'll need to contact the Republic Senate, get authorization for treaty renegotiations. 1 week, Jedi. Not my problem how you make it happen. Results matter, not excuses. Vaklu turned to leave, then paused. And John? Next time we meet, bring your lightsaber. Walking into hostile territory unarmed is brave, but it's also stupid. The galaxy needs more Jedi who understand both courage and pragmatism. Don't get yourself killed doing something noble, but pointless. As Vaklu and his bodyguards disappeared into the merchant quarters crowds, John sat back in his chair, feeling the weight of what he'd just undertaken. 1 week to renegotiate treaties that took years to establish. 1 week to convince a queen to concede power. 1 week to prevent civil war. He reached into his robes and pulled out a small holocommunicator, keying in the encrypted channel to the Jedi Council on Dantooine. Master Vander's image flickered to life, blue and ghostly in the afternoon light. Master, John said without preamble, I need council support for something that's going to be controversial. Very controversial. Tell me, Vandar replied, and John heard both concern and trust in the ancient master's voice. As John explained his plan, the reform treaties, the power-sharing compromises, the delicate balance between Republic interests and Onderon sovereignty, he saw Vander's expression shift from concern to consideration to something that might have been approval. You're proposing we challenge Republic Senate policy, Vandar observed. You're suggesting the council should advocate for treaty modifications that will anger powerful senators and corporate interests. This could have significant political consequences for the order. I know, John acknowledged. But Master, the alternative is civil war on Onderon that spreads to neighboring systems. The alternative is thousands dead and a planet that becomes either a failed state or a Sith recruiting ground. Sometimes preventing war means taking political risks. Vandar was quiet for a long moment, his ancient eyes studying John through the holographic connection. Finally, he spoke. When we knighted you, we said the order needs those who can make hard choices while keeping their souls intact. I suppose this is your first real test of that principle. Very well. I'll bring your proposal to the full council. No promises, but John, this is exactly why we trained you. Exactly why we gave you the freedom to think like a warrior while serving as a guardian. Trust the Force, trust your judgment, and know that whatever happens, you're doing what a Jedi should, fighting for peace even when the fight is political rather than physical. Thank you, Master. Don't thank me yet, Vandar replied with a hint of amusement. You still have to convince Talia, convince the Senate, and keep Vaklu from starting his war. The hard part is just beginning. As the holocom connection closed, John sat in the cafe's outdoor seating area, watching Onderon's twin suns descend toward the horizon. Around him, life continued, merchants haggling, families walking home from work, children playing in the streets despite the tension that pervaded the city. These were the people he'd sworn to protect, not as abstract political principles or strategic objectives, but as living beings who deserved the chance to live their lives in peace. He'd fought Darksiders, infiltrated hostile stations, and passed the trials to become a Jedi Knight. But this might be his hardest battle yet, winning peace through words instead of weapons, through compromise instead of combat. 1 week, 7 days to prevent civil war. John stood, leaving credits on the table for the CAF he'd never touched, and headed back toward the royal palace. He had a queen to convince, a senate to petition, and a revolution to redirect. The Force whispered that this was just the beginning, that Onderon would test him in ways combat never could. But Jon had faced his fears in the trial of spirit, had chosen discipline over power, had committed to being both warrior and guardian. Now it was time to prove those choices meant something in the real galaxy, where peace was harder to achieve than victory, and compromise required more courage than combat. The week that followed was the most intense political battle Jon had ever waged, and unlike any fight his lightsaber training had prepared him for. He spent 18-hour days shuttling between the royal palace, holocom conferences with Republic senators, encrypted communications with the Jedi Council, and carefully monitored meetings in neutral territories with Vaklu's representatives. Sleep became a luxury measured in minutes rather than hours. Meals were consumed standing up while reviewing treaty documents. The Force sustained him when his body wanted to collapse. Queen Talia proved easier to convince than expected. The morning after his meeting with Vaklu, Jon presented his compromise proposal in her private chambers, away from advisors and political pressures. "You're asking me to give up royal authority," Talia said, but her tone was thoughtful rather than angry. "The ceremonial head of state, while an elected parliament handles governance. My family has ruled Onderon for 8 centuries. Your family has also seen Onderon survive 8 centuries of threats, invasions, and political upheavals," Jon countered respectfully. "Your Majesty, the greatest rulers aren't those who cling to power. They're those who ensure their people thrive long after they're gone. A constitutional monarchy with democratic institutions gives Onderon stability, satisfies the reformist's legitimate demands, and preserves your family's historical role. You become a symbol of unity rather than a source of division." Talia walked to her chamber's window, looking out over Izai's ancient walls toward the jungle beyond. "My son," she said quietly, "if I agree to this, he'll never rule as I have. He'll be a figurehead, attending ceremonies and cutting ribbons while elected officials make the real decisions. He'll be something better," Jon said, moving to stand beside her. "He'll be a unifying symbol that transcends political factions. When politicians fight and parties clash, your family remains constant, a reminder of Onderon's identity and history. That's not powerless, Your Majesty. That's essential." She turned to study him, this 17-year-old Jedi who spoke with the certainty of someone far older. "You're very young to understand such things." "I've seen what happens when legitimate authority fights necessary change," Jon replied. "Usually, both sides lose and the people suffer. This way, everyone wins something. Vaklu gets his reforms. You retain your crown and dignity. The people avoid civil war. It's not perfect, but perfection is the enemy of good enough." Talia smiled slightly. "You sound like my late husband. He used to say similar things, that leadership meant knowing when to bend rather than break." Her expression hardened with resolve. "Very well. I'll support your proposal. But Jon, if this fails, if Vaklu rejects compromise and blood is spilled anyway, I want you to know you tried. Sometimes peace isn't possible, no matter how hard we work for it. Then we make it possible," Jon said with quiet intensity. "Failure isn't acceptable when the alternative is thousands dead." The Republic Senate proved far more difficult. Jon spent 3 days in holocom conferences with senators who viewed Onderon as a minor border world whose concerns ranked far below Coruscant politics. The session with Senator Orn Free TAA of Ryloth was particularly frustrating. The corpulent Twi'lek senator saw only how treaty modifications might affect his corporate sponsors' profits. "The current agreements are quite favorable to Republic interests," TAA said, his multiple chins wobbling as he spoke. "Why should we renegotiate from a position of strength? If Onderon wants different terms, they should offer something valuable in return. They're offering continued alliance instead of isolation or potential Sith alignment," Jon replied, struggling to keep frustration from his voice. "Senator, Onderon sits in a strategic location. If civil war breaks out and Vaklu wins, he's already shown willingness to seek alternative allies. The Sith remnants would love a foothold in this sector. Is short-term corporate profit worth that risk? The Sith are scattered, disorganized, hardly a threat. Tell that to the families on Taris whose children were kidnapped by Darksiders 5 years ago. John interrupted. Protocol be damned. Tell that to the Republic soldiers who died fighting Revan and Malak. The Sith don't need massive fleets to be dangerous. They need opportunity and willing hosts. Vaklu could become that opportunity if we force him into desperation. Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan, who'd been listening silently, finally spoke. The Jedi makes a compelling point. We've spent decades rebuilding after the Jedi Civil War. Preventing new conflicts should be our priority, even if it means modest concessions to local governance. I'll support treaty modifications that grant Onderon greater autonomy while maintaining defensive alliance. Other senators began voicing support, some genuinely concerned about peace, others calculating that backing the Jedi proposal might earn political capital. After 3 grueling days of negotiations, amendments, and compromises to the compromises, the Senate voted narrowly to authorize revised treaty terms. Not everything John wanted, but enough to present as genuine reform. The Jedi Council's support came with conditions. Master Atreides, still skeptical of John's methods, insisted on language that preserved Republic security interests. Master Caver wanted guarantees that Onderon's military wouldn't be used against Republic neighbors. Vandar quietly ensured the final proposal included protections for Force-sensitive children, preventing future situations like the Taris kidnappings. By the 6th day, John had assembled a comprehensive package. Constitutional monarchy replacing absolute rule, elected parliament handling governance, renegotiated trade terms favoring local businesses, Republic military presence reduced to advisory role, cultural preservation laws, and mutual defense pact that respected Onderon's sovereignty while maintaining strategic alliance. Now came the hardest part, convincing Vaklu to accept. They met again in the Merchant Quarter, but this time the atmosphere was different. Separatist and Royalist forces had clashed twice in the intervening days. Skirmishes that left 11 dead and dozens wounded. The casualties were escalating. Vaklu's forces grew more aggressive, emboldened by popular support. Talia's military prepared for full-scale conflict. The window for peace was closing rapidly. Vaklu arrived with a dozen guards instead of 4, a statement about deteriorating trust. His face was haggard, suggesting he'd slept as little as John. The general sat heavily. His movements, those of someone carrying enormous weight. I hope your week was productive, Jedi, Vaklu said. Because mine has been hellish. 2 of my commanders want immediate assault on the palace. My followers demand action after yesterday's skirmish, where royal forces killed 3 separatists. I'm running out of reasons to delay the inevitable. John placed a datapad on the table between them. Here are the reasons. Revised treaty terms, approved by the Republic Senate and supported by the Jedi Council. Constitutional monarchy with democratic parliament. Trade reforms. Reduced Republic military presence. Cultural protections. Everything you said you wanted. Vaklu took the datapad, his eyes scanning the document with the speed of someone trained to process tactical information quickly. John watched his expression shift. Suspicion, surprise, calculation, and finally something that might have been hope. This is more comprehensive than I expected, Vaklu admitted. The Senate actually agreed to this. Barely. It required calling in favors, making political promises, and convincing key senators that preventing your civil war served their interests. But yes, they agreed. Talia has also agreed to the constitutional changes. The framework exists for everything you've been fighting for, achieved through negotiation rather than bloodshed. There's always a catch, Vaklu said, suspicious. What's the Republic hiding in the fine print? Read it yourself. I insisted on transparent language, specifically, so you couldn't claim deception later. The catch, if you want to call it that, is that change happens through legal process rather than revolution. Parliament must be elected. Constitutional amendments must be ratified. Transition takes time, probably 2 to 3 years for full implementation. It's not instant gratification, but it's genuine reform. Vaklu set the datapad down, his expression troubled. My followers don't want to wait 2 to 3 years. They want change now. They've been promised action, not more bureaucratic delays. Then lead them, John said intensely. You're not just a general, Vaklu. You're a symbol of reform. Tell your followers that you achieved through negotiation what would have taken years of bloody war. Tell them that real leadership means knowing when you've won, even if the victory looks different than expected. Tell them that Onderon's future is worth patience. And if they don't listen, if the hardliners refuse to accept anything less than Talia's immediate abdication and my assumption of power, John's voice dropped, carrying the weight of hard truth. Then you face a choice. Become the leader Onderon needs, or become another warlord who destroyed his planet for pride. Your followers might want a fighter, but what Onderon needs is a statesman. Which will you be? The words hung between them, challenging everything Vaklu had built his revolution around. The general stood abruptly, pacing the cafe's outdoor area while his guards watched tensely. John remained seated, trusting the force but ready to move if violence erupted. Finally, Vaklu returned to the table. I need guarantees. If I accept this compromise and call for peace, Talia doesn't get to prosecute my followers for their actions during the conflict. Amnesty for all separatists who participated in non-lethal resistance. Those who committed violence face trial, but proportional punishment, not execution or life imprisonment. Agreed, John said immediately. I'll add that to the terms. Talia understands that reconciliation requires forgiveness, not vengeance. And I want a role in the new government, not as dictator, but as elected representative. Let the people choose whether my vision for Onderon deserves a voice in Parliament. That's exactly what democratic process means, John replied. You'll have to campaign, earn votes, convince citizens that your policies serve their interests. You might lose. Can you accept that? Vaklu smiled grimly. I'm a soldier, Jedi. I've accepted the possibility of defeat my entire life. But at least this way, if I lose, it's because the people chose differently, not because I lacked firepower. I can live with democratic defeat. I couldn't live with surrendering without trying to change things. Then we have an agreement. The general extended his hand, not in the formal bow of Onderon nobility, but in the simple grip of one warrior acknowledging another. We have an agreement. I'll order my forces to stand down, call for my followers to accept the compromise, and personally address the Onderonian people about this new path forward. But John, if the Republic betrays these terms, if they revert to exploitation once the immediate crisis passes, I'll remember. And next time, there won't be negotiation. Understood, John said, gripping the offered hand firmly. I'll hold the Republic to their word. That's what Jedi do. We stand between power and those who need protection from it, even when the power wears Republic colors. The announcement came 3 days later, broadcast across Onderon through every available channel. Queen Talia stood on the palace balcony overlooking Izai's Grand Plaza, with General Vaklu beside her. Formerly enemies, now partners in peace. Thousands gathered to watch, royalist and separatist alike, uncertain what this unprecedented unity meant. John stood behind them, his Jedi robes marking him as the mediator who'd made this moment possible. He felt the tension in the crowd through the Force, the skepticism, and hope warring in millions of hearts simultaneously. Talia spoke first, her voice amplified across the plaza. People of Onderon, these past months have tested us as a civilization. We've seen violence in our streets, division in our families, and feared for our planet's future. Today, that changes. I stand here with General Vaklu not as victor and defeated, but as partners committed to Onderon's prosperity. Vaklu took over, his military bearing softening with genuine emotion. I fought for Onderon's independence because I love this world and its people. I believed revolution was necessary because I couldn't see another path. But a young Jedi Knight showed me something I'd forgotten. That strength isn't just knowing when to fight, but knowing when fighting serves no purpose. We have achieved through negotiation what war would have destroyed in the winning. Constitutional reforms, democratic representation, treaty revisions, cultural protections, everything we demanded. Won without orphaning children or burning homes. Together, they detailed the compromise, the constitutional monarchy, the parliamentary elections, the reform treaties. The crowd's reaction was mixed, cheers from some, confused murmurs from others, angry shouts from hardliners on both sides who wanted total victory rather than share compromise. But the violence ended. Over the following weeks, separatist forces stood down. Royal military returned to barracks. The merchant quarter's neutral zone expanded as cooperation replaced confrontation. John worked tirelessly to implement the agreement's details, mediating disputes, ensuring both sides honored commitments, and gradually building trust between former enemies. 6 weeks after the announcement, John stood again before the Jedi Council via holocom, reporting on Onderon's progress. Elections were scheduled. Constitutional conventions were drafting new governance frameworks. Trade negotiations with the Republic proceeded under reformed parameters. The planet that had teetered on civil war's edge now moved toward genuine peace. "You've done well, Knight John," Master Vandar said, and the pride in his ancient voice was unmistakable. "Better than well. You've shown what the Order can achieve when we balance wisdom with pragmatism, when we fight for peace with more than just lightsabers. The Republic Senate has formally commended your actions, as has the Jedi Council." "I did what needed doing," John replied simply. "What any Jedi should do when faced with preventable suffering." "Not any Jedi," Master Caver interjected. "Most would have either chosen sides or attempted forced mediation that satisfied no one. You found the third path, genuine compromise that gave all parties something worth accepting. That requires not just tactical thinking, but understanding people's needs and motivations. Understanding that sometimes the right answer isn't victory, but mutual survival." Master Atreides, her expression still cautious, but no longer hostile, added, "You've proven the Council's decision to knight you was correct. Your unconventional methods served the Force's greater purpose. But John, remember that not every conflict can be resolved through negotiation. Some evils must be fought. Some enemies must be stopped rather than reasoned with. The balance between guardian and warrior means knowing which approach each situation demands." "I understand, Master," John said, "and I'm ready for whatever the Force requires next." John's final day on Onderon arrived with the soft light of dawn breaking over Izai's ancient walls. He stood in the palace gardens, where he'd spent countless hours mediating between factions, and where General Vaklu now found him. "Leaving already?" Vaklu asked, approaching without his usual guard detail, a sign of how much had changed. "I'd hoped you might stay for the elections. See your work through to completion." "My work here is done," John replied. "The rest is up to Onderon's people. That's how it should be. You don't need Jedi oversight to build your future." Vaklu nodded slowly. "I misjudged you, John. When we first met, I saw another Republic puppet, another idealistic fool who'd lecture about peace while understanding nothing of real conflict. I was wrong. You think like a soldier, but serve like a guardian. That's rare, valuable. You're not the first person to tell me I don't fit the Jedi mold," John said with a slight smile. "Probably won't be the last." "Good. The galaxy needs Jedi who don't fit molds. Needs guardians who understand that protecting peace sometimes means making hard compromises, accepting imperfect solutions, and trusting people to choose their own paths." Vaklu extended his hand again. "Thank you. For seeing beyond politics to the people we were supposed to serve. For refusing to let us destroy ourselves. For being what the Order claims to be, but rarely achieves." John gripped the offered hand firmly. "Lead them well, Vaklu. Win your election honestly. Make Onderon the independent, prosperous world you envisioned. Prove that reform through democracy works better than revolution through violence. That's how you honor what we built here." "I will," Vaklu promised. "And John, when you face your next impossible situation, and you will, because Jedi like you attract impossible situations, remember Onderon. Remember that sometimes the hardest battles are won without ever drawing your weapon." As John's shuttle lifted off from the palace landing pad, he looked down at Izai's spreading below, a city that had been on the brink of tearing itself apart, now beginning the slow process of healing. The Force pulsed with cautious optimism, with the potential of better futures taking root in difficult soil. His holocommunicator chimed, a priority message from Master Vandar. John activated. Seeing the ancient Jedi Masters, familiar features materialize in blue light. John, Vandar said, without preamble, I hope you're not too attached to rest, because the Council has another assignment. The situation is complicated. Requires someone with your particular talents. What situation? John asked, already knowing he'd accept whatever came next. Telos system. Republic restoration project on the planet's surface, attempting to rebuild after devastation from the Jedi Civil War. But recently, several reconstruction workers have vanished. Local authorities suspect criminal gangs, but there are reports of unusual Force signatures. Could be nothing. Could be Darksiders establishing operations under cover of humanitarian work. John felt his tactical mind engage automatically. Threat assessment, resource requirements, optimal approach vectors. But beneath the analysis was something else, something he discovered on Onderon. Understanding that every mission involved real people with real lives, that victory meant more than eliminating threats, that being a Jedi warrior meant fighting not just enemies, but fighting for those who couldn't protect themselves. I'll investigate, John said. Send me the full briefing, and I'll head there immediately. John, Vandar added, his ancient voice carrying warmth. You've grown remarkably since that day we found you in Dantooin's fields. The boy who thought only in terms of missions and tactical objectives has become a knight who understands people politics and the complex reality of true guardianship. The Force works through you in unique ways, and the Order is stronger for it. Whatever challenges await on Telos, face them with the wisdom you've earned and the strength you've always possessed. May the Force be with me, John replied. It already is, Vandar assured him. It always has been. As the holocom closed and John's shuttle jumped to hyperspace, the young Jedi Knight settled into meditation, not the tactical analysis that had once defined his practice, but genuine communion with the Force. He felt the currents of the galaxy flowing around him, felt the lives of billions touching his consciousness like starlight, felt the balance between light and dark that defined existence itself. He was 17 years old. A Jedi Knight who thought like a soldier, but served like a guardian. Someone who'd learned that the greatest victories often came without violence, that true strength meant restraint, and that protecting the innocent required understanding them as people rather than objectives. Sullus was still out there, probably training more Darksiders. The Sith remnants plotted in shadows. The galaxy remained dangerous and complex. But John no longer saw these as just threats to be eliminated. He saw them as challenges to be faced with wisdom, courage, and the hard-earned understanding that being a warrior and being a Jedi weren't opposites. They were two parts of the same calling, balanced within him like light and shadow, creating something greater than either alone. John's journey from mysterious child to Jedi Knight had forged something unprecedented in the Order. A guardian who embraced tactical thinking without losing compassion, who fought when necessary but sought peace whenever possible, who understood that protecting the galaxy required more than just lightsaber skill. On Dantooin, he'd learned the Force's fundamentals while struggling against philosophies that seemed at odds with survival. On Taris, he'd faced darkness and chosen to save children rather than pursue glory. On Onderon, he'd prevented civil war through negotiation, proving that battles could be won without bloodshed. But the greatest victory was internal, reconciling the warrior's instinct with the guardian's purpose, accepting that his unique path served the Force just as surely as traditional Jedi methods. He didn't need to choose between soldier and monk. He could be both, finding balance and synthesis rather than division. The Force had brought him to this galaxy for a reason, and now that reason crystallized with clarity. To show that strength and mercy, combat and compassion, tactical brilliance and ethical principles weren't contradictions, but complementary truths. The Jedi Order needed evolution, needed fresh perspectives to face threats that orthodox methods couldn't address. As his shuttle carried him toward Telos, and whatever challenges awaited there, John knew his story was just beginning. Sullus would resurface eventually, their philosophical war unfinished. New threats would emerge from the galaxy's shadows. The balance between light and dark would be tested again and again. But John was ready. Not because he had all the answers, but because he'd learned the right questions. How do we protect without becoming oppressors? How do we fight without losing ourselves? How do we serve peace in a galaxy that often demands war? These questions would define his path forward, each mission another opportunity to refine the balance, to prove that being a warrior Jedi wasn't a contradiction, but an evolution, necessary, powerful, and true. The Force had given him this gift, seeing both sides of guardianship without being consumed by either. Now he'd spend his life honoring that gift, one mission at a time, one saved life at a time, one prevented war at a time. For he was John, Jedi Knight, trained by the Order, tested by darkness, tempered by choice. A warrior who served peace, a tactician who valued life, a guardian who never left anyone behind. And the galaxy, whether it knew it or not, desperately needed exactly that.